everyone, and welcome to another Sovereign Citizens, or not Sovereign Citizens, sorry, I'm on yesterday. It's apropos for the theme of time travel. It was intentional, it wasn't a fuck-up. Welcome to a Tinfoil Spotlight. How's everyone doing? Today we're going to be looking at a particular individual. I believe his name is Andrew Basiago, if I had to... Let me double check. Is it Andrew Basiago? Or is it something else? It's in here somewhere. I looked at it about 50 times while I was looking for stuff. Andrew Basiago, indeed, is his name. He has claims that the United States has a secret time travel program called Project Pegasus. And we're gonna watch some videos about it. It should be fun. It's gonna be a light episode. Just watching this guy make crackpot claims that aren't true, so should be pretty fun. We're not playing bingo or anything, because I don't think we would, get a bingo. If you want to support the stream, do me a favor, like the stream on YouTube, I'd appreciate it, and if you're on Twitch and want to get rid of ads, become a subscriber. Alright, let's jump into it.
Is time travel real? According to lawyer Andrew Basiago, it is.
I notice, by the way, a lot of people bring up the fact that he's a lawyer. A lot of people bring up that he's a lawyer in these videos as if having a law degree has some sort of transferable knowledge base to knowing that time travel is real. It's very bizarre. They're trying to use his credentials as an attorney to lend some sort of, credibility to his statements when they have nothing to do with each other.
In the 1970s and 1980s, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, hired young boys and teenagers to participate in Project Pegasus, a top-secret experiment in time travel. The young men would travel to the past and the future as part of several missions to help avoid crisis and journey to pivotal events in American history, like the Battle of Gettysburg and the Lincoln assassination. Was Basiago right? Surprisingly, one of the only men who could ever prove it is a former United States president.
Oh, he claims well, I'll just play you another clip real quick before we continue. Let me play this for you. He claims that he was in the secret time travel program with Barack Obama.
Now, when did you first meet Barack Obama, or then Barry?
I met Barry Soetoro, and forgive me if during this broadcast I refer to the president as Barry, because that's how I knew him, when I first met him when I was 18 years old. The president, I think, is 45 days older than me, so he had just turned 19 when I met him at College of the Siskiyous in Weed, California. The CIA had placed a summer training program there under Major Ed Dames, the remote viewing pioneer. And Barry and I were among the 10 young people who were brought into the project and participated that summer in a 3-week factual seminar regarding everything to do with Mars. And so I had fairly extensive contact with the president that summer, and then ran into him periodically during the course
Any relation to Chris Gaines? Not that I'm aware of.
of the next several years, whether it was related to the jump room program, which from my perspective was based in Los Angeles, there were several times when I just ran into him during his political activities. I had one meeting with him when I was a reporter for the UCLA Daily Bruin, and there were some times when we had meetings, on Earth related to the jump room program and so forth. So I have sort of a window into his personality and character. I can kind of provide a set of vignettes about a young Barack Obama when he was serving in the CIA's jump room program.
I'm not gonna lie, part of me would absolutely watch a TV show that's young Obama, in a time travel program, but he's, over this shit, and he's just chain smoking constantly, and one day he's gonna be like, I'm gonna order the assassination of an American citizen! I'd watch that show.
Pegasus. Nikola Tesla was a Serbian-American inventor, futurist, and pioneering mechanical engineer Best known for
And most importantly, he was played by David Bowie in The Prestige. Don't forget that. That's one of the best things ever. If I died and one day was played by the future's version of David Bowie, put that in my biography.
his scientific contributions to the design of the modern electricity supply system. During World War II, the research and development facilities of the U.S. Department of Defense, responsible for developing emerging technologies for use by the military, found Tesla's lost research on teleportation. Upon discovering it, the scientists at DARPA had no choice but to follow up on Tesla's invention, and 3 decades later, the United States had its own secret teleportation facilities.
Isn't it incredible that, for whatever reason, the one invention Thomas Edison never stole from Tesla was the time machine? That's so crazy that he was like, I don't know, I'll try and stop alternating current because it hurts me, and I'm gonna take some of your other ideas, but the time travel, you can have it!
A precursor to the Montauk and Philadelphia experiments, Project Pegasus was the DARPA research initiative to produce the first successful time machine, or teleportation device.
The Philadelphia experiment was the supposed experiment that they ran electric current along the hull of a battleship and claimed that it teleported. That's a conspiracy theory, the Philadelphia experiment. There's also at least one film about it that I enjoyed. I think the film makes it actually a little bit about time travel, too. So,
To keep the machine from the public eye, and because of its inherent resilience, DARPA decided to use children as test subjects on the incredible device.
I don't think that makes sense. Like, I get that you're trying to paint them as evil for using children, but why would children ever be ideal for this scenario? It doesn't make any sense. It'd be like saying, we gotta test the rockets, get some kindergartners. They can withstand a lot of G's. They're real squishy. Like, what are you talking about?
That's what Andrew Basiago claims. Basiago is a lawyer, writer, scholar, and self-described 21st century visionary who has claimed that he and other children traveled in time. The Travels. Andrew Basiago claims that he was recruited for Pegasus as his father, Raymond F. Basiago, was a projects engineer in the Ralph M. Parsons Corporation, an electronics and engineering company hired.
Why would you recruit your own child into the dangerous time travel program?
To work for Pegasus in the Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Facility in New Jersey.
Charlie with a $5 super chat on YouTube says, for the lols, thank you very much. I appreciate the support.
For the trips between the ages of 7 to 12, Basiago Jr. would hold his father's hand, count to 3, and jump through an energy curtain. Afterwards, they would find themselves in a dark tunnel moving forward. They called the tunnel the jump room, and when it closed, the men would reappear in a different location in the blink of an eye.
I prefer the time tunnel. Has anyone seen the time tunnel? Bittergrin, thanks for 55 months. The time tunnel was... who was involved in this? Why am I blanking on his name? Irwin Allen, that's who it was. Irwin Allen did the time tunnel, and it's really good. It's about a secret government project to create a time machine, and the time tunnel itself looks awesome. There's no picture of it on the box I can show you, but it's genuinely, like, a great effect for the time. I'm on the internet. I can show you. I'm so dumb. Why do I do this? The time tunnel. This is the tunnel. You go in it and you go through time. Look at how deep that tunnel looks. For a TV budget at the time, this is crazy. For the 60s, what an incredible fucking set piece. Like, if you don't know, genuinely a great, great, great set piece for the 60s. And they could, like, see through the time tunnel what the people who went back in time were doing. You get it. Anyway, that's the time tunnel.
The lawyer claims that he tested 8 different time travel technologies throughout Pegasus.
Hey, Trey.
But most instances involved some type of teleporter.
Ooh, Primer is good. Hold on. I have a special edition of Primer. Look how cool the box looks. Ooh, this is primer. I got it from Australia. Ooh, it comes with a little booklet and everything.
Based on technical papers and designs supposedly found in Nikola Tesla's old apartment after he passed away in 1943.
Excuse you, all of his belongings were meant to go to the pigeon. His will was very specific.
By Basiago.
Unfortunately, it was written in the pigeon language, so.
The teleporting machine consisted of, quote, 2 gray elliptical booms about 8 feet tall, separated by about 10 feet, between which a shimmering curtain of what Tesla called radiant energy, a form of energy that Tesla discovered that is latent and pervasive in the universe, and has among its properties the capacity to bend time-space. As one of DARPA's time-traveling children, Andrew allegedly traveled to Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. in April of 1865, just in time for President Abraham Lincoln's assassination.
Why can't you just, like, go to Coney Island back in the day? Why can't you go on the Queen Anne? Why's everyone gotta go to assassinations? You can't ever just use time travel recreationally. You gotta go watch people get shot. That sounds no fun. That just sounds like a trauma machine.
He claims to have done it not once, but 5 times. Basiago's alleged proof.
So what, did he keep running into himself? You're at the same location 5 times? What happens if you run into yourself? Is it time cop rules? Do you get terribly CGI'd into goo?
Time traveling is a photograph taken in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 18...
Yeah, it is funny that 5 times, too. Vocal Duck Gamer says, dude sounds like a psycho. Yeah, was he like, I just love how Lincoln's head popped. What in the world?
63, at the height of the Cold War. His trips were different each time, and Basiago claims that it was like, quote,
actually Lincoln's head didn't pop, the bullet wasn't that big, and he survived, and they took him across the street where he died like 48 hours later. I know! H-Bird says, just a note in all of this, Tesla's understanding of electromagnetic waves was incorrect, and he not only didn't keep up with physicists in the early 20th century, but also actively rejected things like relativity and quantum mechanics. Yeah, he bad-talked math. He turned into basically Terrence Howard at the end of his life. He was like, these newfangled scientists love math so much. Fucking math. Freyline says, TV show idea, Tesla's pigeon lover jumps through time and uses other Tesla inventions. Fuck it, that could be an Adult Swim show. Bittergrin with the 100 bits says, look, if I get a time machine, I'm riding a Triceratops. Sound of thunder be damned.
They were sending us to slightly different alternate
I understood that short story reference.
realities on adjacent timelines. As these visits began to accumulate, I twice ran into myself during 2 different visits. On another mission, the children allegedly traveled to the future, arriving in the year 2045 to receive small canisters with microfilmed summaries of DARPA intervening in events in the 70s, then returning.
Wait, they have a time machine, but they're still using microfilm? Couldn't they have time traveled to the future and figured out USB drives? Just a thought.
Them to the present.
I always find this use of time travel to be incredibly strange, too. Like, if you invented time travel, maybe I'm different than these people, but if I invented time travel, my first thought is not, I'm gonna go back to the past. My thought is, I'm gonna go to the future and see if there's any technology I can take advantage of, or that I can make use of to improve my time machine, or to keep me safe if I go back in history. I don't want to catch a bunch of diseases from the past or bring my diseases to the past. I don't want to get shot with old-timey bullets or stabbed with bayonets. I don't know. You go to the future, you steal some technology to become nigh invincible, then you can go watch Lincoln's head get popped multiple times.
According to Basiago, the future was nothing like he imagined, in a good way. Quote, the environment was like a garden city of tomorrow, with a balance between the built and the natural environment, and very advanced activities were going on. I saw no automobiles and no pollution. There had clearly been a positive transformation of society that involved the use of teleportation to obviate all these other very polluting forms of transportation that we use today. Obama in outer space. As if
he still tries to pitch the teleportation thing And I want to point out that if we did develop some kind of teleportation, if that is even in any way physically or feasibly possible in the future, undoubtedly it would require virtually infinite energy to do. So at that point, we already probably would have solved some sort of energy issue and are borderline using some kind of Dyson sphere-esque technology. I don't know. It's all sci-fi bullshit.
Andrew Basiago's claims weren't outrageous enough. He also claims that one of his child co-workers was a teenage Barack Obama, who then went by the name Barry Soetoro. According to the Chrononaut, they both traveled to secret American military bases on Mars, visiting the area twice between 1981 and 1983. The missions to outer space were to acclimate Martians to human presence on
It
their
didn't work out too well for Berlinghoff Rasmussen in Star Trek TNG. He was real stupid about it, though. Like, what he should not have tried to find the flagship of the Federation. He should have flown to Earth and found some technology on Earth. The only reason he fucked up is because he literally stole from what is effectively a space navy vessel. Like, he did the stupidest thing he could have done.
own planet and secure a possible alliance, as well as to fulfill the CIA's wish to, quote, establish a defense regime protecting the Earth from threats from space. As part of the mission, the time-traveling teenagers had to be respectful of their surroundings and as quiet as possible. Army Major Ed Dames allegedly told Obama that, simply put, quote, your task is to be seen and not eaten. During one of the trips, Basiago and Soetoro exchanged a few friendly words while en route to the jump room to travel to outer space. To acknowledge his fellow comrade, Barry merely told Basiago, quote, we're here. Basiago and Obama, now the 44th President of the United States, did not keep in touch after their travels to outer space.
You think Basiago ever goes to a class reunion and he's like, I used to know Barack Obama in my time travel program, and they're like, oh yeah. And then they go and talk alone, and they're like, did you hear Barry? I almost called him Barry. Basiago. Basiago's gone fucking crazy. He thinks he time traveled with Obama.
Not surprisingly, the White House has vehemently denied Obama's role as a Martian conquistador for the CIA.
I cannot imagine that they have commented on this at all, to be honest. I would be shocked at a denial.
In the words of Tommy Vietor, the spokesman for the National Security Council. However, in an unexpected turn of events, chrononaut Andrew Basiago ran for president in 2016. According to Basiago, he was already sure he would be elected, as he once saw himself winning the election during one of Project Pegasus's trips to the future.
So what happened? What happened? You failed. He thought, oh, Barry could do it. It's my turn.
In an official interview, Basiago stated that he knew he would win between 2016 and 2028 because he was sure he would not run past that. Basiago's campaign heavily relied on his past experiences with time travel. A statement on his campaign website claimed that, quote, for 70 years, the U.S. government has been concealing advanced technologies because they might be socially, economically, or technically disruptive in nature.
Also, I feel like the first thing you do with time travel is you go back in time and you give it to yourself earlier.
These technologies include the teleportation
You
technology
gotta be time travel maxing.
developed by DARPA's Project Pegasus. They may also include cancer cures. The government should begin a program to declassify and deploy this knowledge. The standard of technical disclosure
Why hasn't he been on Joe Rogan yet? He's too legitimate for Rogan.
should be what provides the people the best available technology. This will enable the United States to reclaim its mantle as the world's catalyst of applied science. In addition to being an
That
alleged
would cause a bootstrap paradox. I'm sorry, do you think I'm building a time machine to not rip the fabric of space-time apart with paradoxes? You think I'm not gonna do shit to see what happens?
time traveler, Basiago is also a fervent believer in the existence of the Sasquatch.
You can literally objectively answer the metaphysical question of the grandfather paradox. You gotta try it to see what happens.
Even before Project Pegasus, a toddling Andrew spotted the strange creature with a child on a trip to the Adirondacks. In another official interview, Basiago bragged that he was, quote, the first presidential candidate since Theodore Roosevelt to affirm the existence of Sasquatch based on a personal encounter.
Did Teddy Rose... That sounds like something Teddy Roosevelt would have done. Did Teddy Roosevelt believe in Bigfoot? That sounds like that doesn't sound crazy to me at all. Like, don't get me wrong, I think he's wrong, but like, I could totally see Teddy Roosevelt believing in Bigfoot. Unironically, that dude fucking loved nature and going out hunting and shit. I fully believe he fucking thought Bigfoot was real.
As a scratcher, Andrew Basiago promised that, if elected, he would name the Sasquatch as an American endangered species and would assign part of the national budget to preserve the creatures.
I'd love to know what that program's budget would look like. Our budget, $8 million to protect the habitat of Bigfoot. So we just gonna sit here and draw a paycheck? What are we doing? What do we do?
Fact or fiction? According to Alfred Weber, a fellow lawyer specialized in exopolitics, which studies the political and social implications of extraterrestrial presence, Basiago's claims are true. Weber claims that teleportation and time travel have existed in the American military since the 1940s.
So you know he's legitimate. It's weird that the United States never used their time travel or teleportation to, you know, win the Cold War. Kinda seems like most of the 20th century was trying to win the Cold War, and they just didn't use the clear advantage? That's crazy. What good sports. Just a peach with a dollar tip says, my dad worked at a Navy base as a civil servant, and there was a rumor that a spy got caught trying to get on the base. The spy supposedly wanted to get pictures of a sub. One of the MPs laughed and said you could get a scale model at the local hobby store. It's kind of fun. And then Lennon Cat says, apparently he also wrote about the encounter. Teddy Roosevelt wrote about a fatal Bigfoot encounter. Of course he did. Of course he did. Coming back to the fire, he stood by it a minute or two, peering out into the darkness, and suddenly remarked, Bauman, that bear has been walking on 2 legs. It was told by... Let me see if I can get... I just want to quote. Come on. Bauman uttered unnerved, and believing that the creature with which he had the deal was something either half-human or half-devil, some great goblin beast, abandoned everything but his rifle and struck off at the speed down the pass, not halting until he reached the beaver meadows where the hobbled ponies were still grazing. Mounting, he rode onwards through the night until far beyond the reach of pursuit. Wilderness Hunter by Theodore Roosevelt. So, I don't know if you guys know this, but if you compare Bigfoot sightings to sightings of bears, they correlate almost exactly. So, genuinely, it was probably a bear that was standing on its hind legs. I just think people aren't used to seeing bears on their hind legs and stuff, and it freaks them out, and they only get glimpses of it through the trees or whatever, and their brain fills in Bigfoot.
However, instead of using the devices to transfer goods and services, the machines...
And a time travel meme. The moment you realize the ship they use as a time machine in Star Trek IV was stolen from the Klingon Doc Brown. That's true, I hadn't considered that.
...are hoarded by the Defense Department.
In fairness, they used the gravitational slingshot of the sun more than the craft itself, but yes. Actually...
To Weber, quote, it's an inexpensive, environmentally friendly means of transportation. The Defense Department has had it for 40 years, and former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld used it to transport troops to battle. Although most experts have...
And that's why we had such an easy time in Iraq and Afghanistan. Let freedom ring. Do I know about the McDowell Bigfoot? It was a furry visiting the Blue Ridge foothills. Maybe all sightings of Bigfoot are just furries. That's my headcanon.
Imply that Basiago's claims are the result of mental illness and pathological lies. Others believe that the man is truly a pioneer of time-traveling science, and that he's being silenced by DARPA and the Department of Defense simply for telling the truth. Since losing the presidential election, Andrew Basiago's online presence has significantly diminished, and he hasn't made a public statement since.
I wonder why. He's definitely legitimate, so I wonder why.
welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrin. Is it possible to travel backwards and forwards in time? Or is this simply the fodder of a good science fiction novel? Tonight, we'll meet two whistleblowers who allege they've both been involved in secret military time travel experiments. We'll also meet an
Sorry, that the turn, and now I'm shooting this scene. This is I'm on this camera now.
military time travel experiments.
Like he can see himself getting ready to do it. Come on, man. What is that? What is that?
We'll also meet an experimental physicist who maintains that claims we've already secretly achieved time travel defies all rational and scientific.
Would you ever look at the little thing below his lip? You're telling me you don't trust that guy? He seems so legitimate with facial hair choices like that. If you can't trust him, who can you trust? Would I like to be the host of this kind of show? No, I'd like to be the host of a show that's the opposite of this, which is what I'm doing right now. What? Ultimate Undying says, sorry, more memes. Well, not much of a mystery here. I think that's pretty self-evident. Freyline says, I finally found it. Oh, God. Here it is.
Here's a perfect example of using scientific observation to infer what's actually going on in the world. The headline says, study finds Bigfoot sightings correlate with high black bear populations. In other words, wherever you find people claiming to have seen a Sasquatch, you will also find lots of these black bears. So there's one of two conclusions we can draw here. Either lots of people who claimed they saw bears were actually seeing Sasquatches, and that's the reason why we don't have more
I wouldn't like the opportunity to interview conspiracy theorists. It would be interesting, but it would be frustrating. I've talked to Peter before, and that's always difficult. Because I don't want to... You want to ride that line between inquisitiveness about their beliefs, but you also kind of want to push back against it, and they don't want that. I don't know. I don't think I'm the person for it. I think I'm too big of a bitch. Like, I genuinely don't think I could do it in an even-handed way.
Sasquatch sightings because these people just thought they were seeing bears, and also why we don't have a lot of photos, because it's like, well, why photograph that? It's just a common black bear. Or, much more likely, the Sasquatches and the black bears have learned to cooperate because they know they look similar. That this is why the big feet have stayed hidden for so long, because they have learned to do a number of parent trap style shenanigans where they will swap places with a black bear and vice versa. And the key to understanding logic and the scientific method is in realizing that there's no reason that both of these things can't be true.
Scientific thought. Our mission is to investigate these claims and follow the truth wherever it may lead. It is time to redefine reality.
A genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid.
Jesus, these little intro, whatever you want to call them, they're extreme.
Extreme technology can alter weather patterns.
Created by the corporation of the strain, not the answers.
Engineered by the Illuminati.
I'm here with Andrew Basiago, who is a lawyer in the state of Washington and a pioneer in time travel. Andrew, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm sorry, all the editing in this is hilarious.
Andrew, can you detail your involvement in Project Pegasus?
You can tell that, like, the main guy thinks that secondary side angles are dramatic, but, like, and he's not incorrect in that they can be when used sparingly and tastefully, but he's overusing them to comedic effect, and I don't think he realizes it.
Pegasus was a classified defense-related research and development program that was undertaken in the late 1960s and early 1970s by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It was developing different forms of quantum access on behalf of the U.S. president.
Ooh, quantum access. That sounds sci-fi. He has to be legitimate.
Intelligence community and military. That is to say, it was developing different forms of time travel so that time travel could be used to develop intelligence data to brief the president and executive branch agencies about aspects of the past and future that could then be used for contingency planning for future events.
Andrew, can you tell us when and how you became involved in Project Pegasus?
I guess I don't understand. If you invent a time machine, why do you need to have contingency plans for future events? You just go back and you stop the events whenever they happen. It doesn't make sense.
I was brought into Project Pegasus informally in 1967-68. My late father, Raymond F. Basiago, was a senior projects engineer for the Ralph M.
You can tell he's been telling this story for decades.
Company. And he took me to the old Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey. And in Building 68 at Curtiss Wright during those years, there was a room called the teleport. And in the front of the room, there was an object that consisted of two parenthesis-shaped armatures. And when you stood in the room, let's say about 10 feet from that device, it generated a shimmering curtain of what the discoverer of this device, the developer of this device, Nikola Tesla, called radiant energy. Radiant
Kind of sounds like you're describing a Stargate, but instead of a full, like, loop circle, it's just, like, two parentheses. Still kind of sounds like you're describing a Stargate. Just putting it out there.
Energy Tesla found is a form of energy that's latent and pervasive in the entire universe, and that when it is tapped from the quantum plenum, has the capacity to bend the fabric of time-space, so that when you jump through a
And he said time-space instead of space-time.
field of such energy, you're physically relocated elsewhere on the face of our planet. So my father explained how we were going to jump
Why on the planet? Couldn't it be anywhere?
through that field of energy and arrive in several seconds on a hillside somewhere else in the country. And we did so. He grabbed my hand and we jumped through the field of energy. And we entered an illuminated tunnel that was very similar to the accounts that people described during the near-death experience. The tunnel was a dense, luminous cylinder of light that was moving sort of along like streamers of smoke, but you could tell that it was light. We were moving very rapidly, and in several seconds we saw a pinprick of light in the distance, and it rapidly moved towards us and then very rapidly collided with us. And we found footfall in the destination that would be used for the next 5 years, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
If you were sitting across from Andrew Basiago and he told you that story, what would you think, what would you say?
My reaction is not to try to discredit him, but to try to find out the real truth underneath the statement.
This is a competing time travel grifter? That's interesting. Medicated person says, I know we're not doing Rumble ads today, but I literally got this ad yesterday and thought of you. Oh no!
Don't assume that free speech means the right to freely hurt people's feelings. Why would you use free speech to hurt someone when
Why is he...
we can use free speech to bring people together? This is a time for true unity. What if free speech revealed that we are more united than they'd ever dare imagine?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and use my free speech to be like, I'm pretty sure I heard that guy's a rapist, but whatever. Altered Undying says, Hannah, funny PM, don't share, but read it when you can. Okay.
How unlikely or likely is it that we have already achieved time travel, but it's being kept hidden from the public?
I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to believing what the government says. Responsible governments and responsible government servants and agencies might well consider that if time travel had been discovered and was working, say, via a secret government department, they would want to keep that absolutely secret. The idea of time travel being available, being known to certain government scientists. Can we think together of an area in the past where it looked as if some ultimate disaster was about to happen. Let's think about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, Jesus. Are we gonna be like, because the world has never ended, it must mean that time travelers always prevented it? No, that's a bad worldview, because then you're not going to be worried about things, because you're going to go, we'll always be pulled back from the brink of disaster at the last minute by a time traveler. No, that's crazy. That's crazy. Don't believe that.
It seemed so out of character for the Russians to withdraw those missiles. But what?
I mean, I don't think they wanted the world to end. That whole thing was a big fucking scary thing. Glad I wasn't alive for it.
A time traveler had seen what was going to happen if, and had somehow...
I'm sorry, does he think there needs to be a time traveler for the Soviet Union to be aware of mutually assured destruction? I assure you, by the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, everyone was aware of mutually assured destruction. You didn't need a time traveler to predict the future if tensions didn't cool down. It was pretty evident.
Communicated that...
Welcome to the pilot of 7 days. Wait a sec. We did it. A show was mentioned, and I have it within arm's reach. That never happens. That's crazy.
Global destruction danger, and
also Morning Edition.
Persuaded the Russians to go back, or what if there were, shall we say, secret time travel conspiracies, as it were, in both the Kremlin and the White House?
What my dad later explained is that when he saw me standing next to him in Gettysburg in 1863, he said, I knew then you were going to be in the project.
You've detailed...
You're thinking 12 Monkeys is not within reach? The movie, yes. The TV show, no. Movie, 12 Monkeys. I don't have the show. Never seen the show.
Your involvement in the teleportation aspect of Project Pegasus. What about your involvement in the time travel experiments?
By the fall of 1970, they were already moving us backward in time 12 hours. In other words, we would teleport to New Mexico, spend an entire day there involved in project activities, and then when we arrived via teleportation back at Curtiss-Wright, it was maybe 11 o'clock in the morning rather than 10 or 11 o'clock at night. We asked them, you know, you're setting us back in time, aren't you? And they said, yes.
So tell me about this photograph.
You'd be losing hours of your life, relatively speaking, compared to the people around you doing this, I should point out. Because, like, you went back in time every day, so effectively for you, it's like you lived that day twice. So compared to the people around you not time traveling, you're twice as old for every day you time travel. Like, you age 2 days for every day you completely go back and undo via time travel, because you still are experiencing linear aging from your perspective.
Where you're actually...
He's only 25 years old.
Seen at the Gettysburg Address.
Well, they sent me to Gettysburg via a new technology in 1972 called plasma confinement.
So we see when this...
Always with the plasma! They're so obsessed with plasma!
Picture in Gettysburg and you're standing... how?
I just decided that I would walk about 100 paces on a diagonal from the stage, and then stand with my left foot forward and my right foot to the right so that people looking over at me wouldn't see how large these shoes were. And then I would look in the opposite direction from where I knew Lincoln would soon be arriving on the right side of the dais to give the Gettysburg Address. And it was in that position, that odd position, wearing those grossly oversized men's shoes, that I was photographed by a contemporary photographer, in a photograph that's now known as the Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg. What my dad later explained is that when he saw me standing next to him...
Weird fake details. A lot of people think that when you lie, adding a bunch of superfluous details makes it seem more realistic, but often it actually does the opposite, because people, when they're constructing memories and stuff, don't necessarily remember all the little minutia. But, like, if you're telling a story like that, it often feels like you're constructing a narrative more than telling the events as you actually remember them.
In Gettysburg in 1863, he said, "I knew then you were going to be in the project."
I spoke with a lawyer in the state of Washington. His name is Andrew Basiago, and he claims that as a child he was part of a time travel teleportation program that was conducted by DARPA. What do you make of that claim?
I think the military explores everything. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I wouldn't be stunned if the U.S. military, well, many military around the world, attempted such experiments. They've been known to do experiments that with little regard for human life and safety.
I mean, Project Pegasus was so deeply compartmentalized that there were even disagreements among some of the project principals about what was going on immediately inside the project.
The fact that they would, the various things they've done in psychology and all kinds of things. They will try pretty much anything. They have an infinite budget. And so I wouldn't be shocked if they have tried things. I'd be stunned if they made any progress whatsoever.
Reporter.
See, that's a reasonable answer. Like, the United States government has spent money on a lot of stupid bullshit, right? Trying to figure out how to brainwash people using drugs, etc. So, like, I could believe that the US government wasted a bunch of money trying to develop some stupid time travel thing, because the government tries all sorts of stupid things sometimes. But I agree with what he said, in that I'd be shocked if they made any sort of progress. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Claims to have run into the famous inventor Nikola Tesla at a coffee shop looking very shaken, and Tesla went on to explain to the reporter that he'd just been zapped in his laboratory with about 3.5 million volts, and went on to explain that he found himself outside his time frame reference, whatever that means. He also reported he could see the immediate past, present, and future. Was Nikola Tesla telling this reporter that he had achieved time travel, and what do you make of that claim?
Well, I think that 3.5 million volts can really affect your head. I'm sure he did see the past and the future, at least in his head. I don't think any time travel was involved.
When Nikola Tesla died in New York City in January of 1943, there were two teams that were racing to his apartment to seize his paperwork. Two were special agents with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The other two were intelligence officers for the War Department. And the War Department officers beat the FBI team there and seized Tesla's paperwork, his entire corpus of writings that were held there at his apartment. I learned during my investigation of Project Pegasus over the last 10 years that those papers were then forwarded to the individuals in the world that it would make the most sense to forward them to, the world's most distinguished physicists who were then gathering in Los Alamos. That is where time travel remains sequestered. It was weaponized during World War II. And
was Los Alamos where they did the Manhattan Project?
Theory and practice of teleportation has been sequestered within the U.S. defense technical community since 1943.
One has to remember that the Manhattan Project brought together the best and brightest physicists in the world.
So we're taking an actual historical happening where they brought together a ton of physicists to work on a top secret project and using it as cover for their secret time travel thing, sure.
Cost $5 billion or whatever it cost in 1945, and they made an atomic bomb. The thing you're talking about is so much beyond that, some number of scientists in the military could pull that off is truly a remarkable thing.
The problem here has been that individuals currently theorizing about the feasibility of time travel have been denied access to the time travel technologies that have resulted in the classified defense technical realm as a result of being spontaneously discovered, seized by the U.S. Department of Defense, and then developed secretly over many decades. And so we're in a bit of a historical interregnum here where a number of physicists contributed ideas and devices to the U.S. defense effort so that time travel emerged secretly under the aegis of the U.S. Department of Defense. But brilliant luminaries of our time, like Dr. Michio Kaku and Dr. Stephen Hawking, cannot speak authoritatively about time travel because they don't know what the state of the art is.
They can't talk about it. I can, because I used the time machine. Trust me, bro.
There is nothing in Einstein's great theories which make time travel impossible. In fact, they point rather in its favor than against it.
Do any of Einstein's theories even allow for time travel or the creation of a time travel device?
Forward, because of time dilation.
He would be rolling in his grave if he thought that that was true. The special theory of relativity, the first one that he came out with in 1905, specifically has in it causality, and it's specifically set up so that you absolutely cannot have time travel.
I would prefer to phrase it as, there is nothing in Einstein's great theories which make time travel impossible. In fact,
why do I care what this guy says? The other guy's a PhD physicist. This guy's just a guy who doesn't like the government.
In fact, they point rather in its favor.
I don't know if you know this, but not trusting the government isn't a credential.
Than against it.
And one has to be very explicit when you say time travel. We're really talking about traveling backwards in time.
So during those years, I found myself essentially taking these trips to the past so that I could interact with that past event and gather intelligence data, and then we would be debriefed when we returned to New Jersey. So I visited different locations in the primordial past, in the ancient past, the modern past, and in the immediate past.
Backwards in time is completely not acceptable, and that's because it's backwards in time where you could upset the balance of cause and effect.
Nothing is so ridiculous that we should laugh it out of the room.
They were
Nothing is so ridiculous that we should laugh it out of the room. Do you not see how that's, as a policy, is going to lead to a system that encourages the most insane, sensational claims and incentivizes them to get attention? That's a terrible piece of advice. We need some sort of heuristic to get rid of bad ideas. What are you talking about?
Continually sending me back to the site of President Lincoln's assassination on April 14th of 1865. And I don't think they were really trying to explore that historical question so much as they were trying to see whether if they sent the same child to the same point in time, whether the same events would result. And every time I was sent there, he was assassinated.
Einstein to Einstein.
I mean, did you try to stop him at all? Like, why would it be different?
Causality, cause and effect, is absolutely sacrosanct. And so there's no way in his theories he would allow such a thing. I mean, as a matter of fact, the reason why he disliked quantum mechanics so much was because it allowed on a microscopic level, some level, acausality. And that was the one thing he rejected completely. So he would say that his theories have built into them the fact that you cannot go backwards in time. Forwards in time is easy, actually.
You just said that traveling forward in time is easy. You got to explain that one, Scott.
Well,
you just got to go real fast.
There's the thing called the twin paradox, okay, which is a very famous thing that came out of special relativity. And the idea being you have two twins, one stays on Earth, one goes off in a rocket ship and comes back.
If you were to leave Earth on a voyage into the universe in a very, very fast spaceship, and you and I synchronized our watches before you left, when you returned, our watches would no longer be synchronized.
The person that comes back, for them, it's 2050, but in fact, it's 2100 on Earth. So in fact, they have moved forward 50 years in time, in that sense. So they would come back to an Earth which is the future from their perspective in terms of where they are. So and that's actually been a measured effect. We've measured it using airplanes. You put a very precise clock on an airplane and encircle the Earth.
Lennon Cat says, look at me, I'm traveling forward in time right now.
And the time.
Me too. I hate it. Can we just pause for a sec and catch
Time
our
on
breath?
that clock is a little bit less than the time on the clock that was left there. So that's a measured effect. It's not even hypothetical.
So speed and energy, that is the energy which enabled the speed to be achieved, appear to have a very serious effect on time.
What the public needs to know, most especially today's time travel theorists who are still trying to develop time travel, is not only were different forms of time travel developed in the early 1970s, but by summer of 1971, the U.S. Defense Department had already proved the existence of the multiverse.
What about the concept of the multiverse? The idea that there are
I think it's overused and Hollywood should stop.
perhaps an infinite number of possibilities for the future, and each one of those is its own universe. So therefore, you could travel back in time, and if you created a paradox, you killed your grandfather, then you would create a universe where you don't exist. There would be another universe where you do exist. Wouldn't the multiverse then perhaps nullify the grandfather paradox and the obstacle to traveling back in time?
Well, except that if you go to another universe, then you're not really traveling back in time in your universe. You're traveling back in time in another universe. I mean, it's not clear to me that nullifies it. To me, it's in some senses sidestepping the question, I think. You know, when one talks about time travel, you're really talking about traveling back in time in your universe to your, the universe you live in. Travel back in time in another universe doesn't seem to me to be sort of quite as satisfying and I don't think that's what people really mean. You know, if you kill your grandfather in another universe, then you don't exist. Well, is that traveling back in time? I don't know. But certainly the multiverse.
Have you seen the trailer for the upcoming time travel paradox movie? No.
Mathematically, it's quite a robust idea. When you get to the state where space-time and bending is extreme, then you can generate some of these effects, like wormholes and things like that. So that's the idea, but this is nowhere near practically realizable at this point.
The great theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking has gone on record as saying that one day mankind will be able to travel into the distant future. He stresses, however, that this time travel will be limited to a forward motion. What then are we to make of the remarkably sincere account from
remarkably sincere account? This liar sounds real convincing to me. I'll take a look at this trailer later. Kinda not sure if I can play it on stream, so I'm probably not gonna, but I'll check it out later.
Lawyer Andrew
H-Bird says you can tell by his face that the physicist is rehearsing everything he's going to say in his publicist when he fires them for booking him in this BS documentary.
Basiago, who claims he was part of a time travel experiment and he himself traveled backwards and forwards in time.
I think they should believe me because I've spent 12 years now investigating my personal direct experiences in a classified U.S. defense project.
Okay, that's just trust me, bro. You're just saying trust me, bro, with more words. You're a liar. Stop it.
I've gathered...
He cannot be making enough money off this fucking grift to live. What's the point?
Literally hundreds of facts regarding the people, the places, the technologies, and the time travel experiences that I had. Now,
okay, do you have any evidence of any of it, or do you just have hundreds of claims?
Right individual. I'm a Cambridge-educated lawyer, a past member of Mensa. But
Mensa's for fucking losers.
I am not Ray...
Just putting it out there.
Bradbury. I am not a creative writing genius. I'm a journalist and a lawyer. And I've spent 12 years now gathering as much information as I can, and I'm simply telling it so that other people have the benefit.
What is Mensa? Mensa's a big brain boy club. Basically, it's supposed to be for, like, you can only join our club if you're like superior intelligence. So it's a circle jerk of the most obnoxious people you've ever met. Like, you know, the kind of people who don't just like know stuff, but they like feel superior because they know stuff, and they like always have to be the actually, like, just vapid assholes whose entire identity is that they're smarter than you, actually.
Benefit of knowing.
I do like that he used lawyer too, because as we all know, everyone trusts lawyers.
That these things took place.
Is it possible that
He did it again! Stop doing the turn!
People have the benefit of knowing that these things took place.
What were you doing over here, sir? What were you looking at? What were you looking at? Nothing? You were looking at nothing because you were just looking over here so you could do the dramatic turn. What are you doing? Look at this.
Is it
Fuck you. Fuck you and your little turns.
Possible that mainstream physicists who negate a present capability to time travel are simply wrong? Or are they guilty of what one researcher... Time travel are simply wrong? Or are they guilty of what one researcher has called faulty scientific due diligence with respect to quantum access time travel technology?
In that sense, I don't think it has so much to do with time travel as it has to do with the structure of general relativity and the structure of physical theories that do have limits that are basically nonsensical. When you get to the state where space-time and bending is extreme, then you can generate some of these effects, like wormholes and things like that. So that's the idea, but this is nowhere near practically realizable at this point.
The whole problem is that we shake our heads at fundamentalist religion of various kinds and say, well, the guy's just closed his mind to all the other possibilities. But there is a danger.
For the record, I do have a second camera. I absolutely have a second camera. I just don't use it because I think it's obnoxious to do this. It's one thing if you're filming a video to cut in between, but that guy's being overly dramatic. I do have a second camera. It's right here. See? It's right here. I got one. I'm not jealous. Altered Undying says, having a law degree does not affect the laws of physics. Are you sure? What if I object?
Of fundamentalism in science, and a number of concepts have become ingrained in the traditional scientific teaching that goes on in the leading universities and in the leading research companies.
For me, H.G. Wells said it best.
He did it again.
Leading research companies.
For me, H.G. Wells said it best. We all have our own time machines. Those that take us back are memories. And those that carry us forward are dreams. And now, we'd like to know what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com. In the meantime, don't be afraid.
You fucker!
Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Good night.
How many was that in the last, like, in the last 2 minutes? He switched back and forth how many fucking times? Just a Peach with a $1 tip says, one of your 4-pod fans has a question for you in the live stream Discord. Let me take a look. Aw. Is time travel like when I take a nap after playing and then it is dinner time? Bolt the dog. And then there's a picture of Bolt the dog. Very similar, Bolt. Very similar. Cutie.
Third Phase Moon, Blake Cousins here. A special report. Dr. J. Andy Elias speaks with Andrew D. Basiago. He's a lawyer, a writer, and a 21st century visionary, also time traveler. What you're about to see is quite controversial. Let me tell you, what Andrew claims is extraordinary. Is it the truth? He claims he worked with DARPA, time travel.
You might even say it's incredible. What he's saying is absolutely, literally incredible.
Listen to this incredible experience. Dr. J. Andy Elias, live right now.
With that being said, let's go ahead and introduce today our very special guest, the one and only Mr. Andrew Basiago. Andrew, you with us?
Yes, I am, Dr. J. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. It's been quite some time that we've been meaning to do this, and I'm finally glad we're able to do it. And for all those who don't know you, I think the first time the word chrononaut was coined was regarding you. Am I right?
Someone had to have come up with that in like a 50s or 60s sci-fi book. That sounds like something someone would have written.
Well, I popularized it, I guess, in the same way that Buckminster Fuller didn't originate, but popularized the word geodesic dome.
I've not heard either of those terms used.
Chrononaut, as far as we're able to tell, emerged in a 1962 American science fiction novel.
Okay, so there you go. It is from a science fiction novel called that shit.
But it was science fact when we began time traveling in the late 1960s. And it's a term that I'm seeking to popularize primarily because I believe that the cadre of chrononauts that emerged in the late 60s and early 70s deserve the same status as the astronauts. And by the way, they did not just include Americans. There were also, for example, British and Russian chrononauts.
And now, let's go back to the Project Pegasus, because when do you think the first time travel experiments began? Was it Philadelphia experiment? Was it before that? How does Montauk fit into all this? I mean, I want you to explain it to everybody out there listening as if they've never heard this information before. So essentially, let me go back to that initial question. When did time travel for humans begin?
In antiquity, we know that because we know that when DARPA established Project Pegasus in the mid to late 1960s, they created an intelligence funnel in which they put, for example, the experimentation by the Sumerian, Babylonian, and Egyptian civilizations in time travel, as well as foreign technology from the Nazi German and the Soviet Russian
Did he just imply that Sumerians had time travel technology? So they were writing on clay tablets, but somehow cracked time travel. They couldn't get the steam engine, but they got time travel. Not sure about that. Toreador says Gozer told them how to do it.
As well as reverse engineered extraterrestrial technology. So for as long as we've been visited by extraterrestrials, which goes back thousands of years to antiquity, maybe even to the propagation of life on Earth, time travel has existed somewhere in the cosmos because it was utilized, it has been utilized, for extraterrestrials to reach our planet across the vast reaches of space and time, namely time-space. In the modern era, I would say sort of in the post-industrial revolution Earth civilization that we're living in, I think we can...
What did you miss? This guy is part of Project Pegasus, which he claims is the government's time travel program. He's full of shit and a lawyer.
Identify a significant point in terms of Nikola Tesla's stay in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899, because we know that he was beginning to experiment with vortal teleportation during that famous stay in Colorado Springs. And we know also that my late father, Raymond F. Basiago, repeated those teleportation experiments at the Thomas A. Edison Research Laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey, where my father worked between 1956 and 64. So there were precursors. Now, you mentioned...
Are there records of your father working there? Just curious. Overthought says, free time travel novel idea. A Mormon from modern-day Utah develops a time travel machine and goes back to meet Jesus, only for the people there to mistake him as the savior. Oh, yeah, it's not bad. Okay. Yeah.
A very important chapter in time travel history, which is the so-called Philadelphia experiment. After Nikola Tesla's death on January 7th of 1943, later in 1943, there was a time travel experiment that was undertaken utilizing Tesla's teleportation technology. But the Philadelphia...
It's funny, the idea that they invented time travel but didn't, like, go back and kill baby Hitler. Instead, we just decided to, like, nuke civilians in Japan twice. I don't know. Seems like a weird use of our technology at the time if you have time travel.
The experiment story that has come down to us is the cover story that was scripted by...
Is he just citing The Prestige? Hey, if you can't cite a Christopher Nolan movie in your historical documentary, what can you cite, okay? Are you telling me Josephus is really better than Christopher Nolan? How many movies did Josephus make? 0. Not a single screenwriting credit. What a bitch.
Naval intelligence. So, for example, it wasn't an experiment into radar invisibility involving the Eldritch, as the classic storyline and the one that was recapitulated in the movie and so forth in 1984 told. It was, in fact, an experiment.
Yeah, I've heard about that guy, Spokane Dog Man. That sucks.
Experiment involving utilizing Tesla teleportation to move a ship called the Martha's Vineyard away from, in light of the fact that the Nazi Navy was beginning to chain ordnance to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So, in other words, it was the direct application of Tesla teleportation technology. And all of the other major facts that have come down to us in what I call the Philadelphia experiment cover story were alterations of the original facts.
Bittergrin with 100 bits says, actually, Josephus made 32 movies, but that's after time traveling to 2030, so none of them have come out yet. Well, there you go. I look forward to them. Almost on a hype train.
To conceal the critical linkage between Tesla, teleportation, and the Los Alamos physicists, and by that I mean the Manhattan Project physicists, who during and after the war were publicly touting their advances in building more destructive atomic bombs, but concealing the time travel research that they were undertaking at the same time. So there was a Philadelphia experiment.
Altered Undying says, go hype train, go, choo-choo.
But all of the facts were changed. The ship didn't go back to Norfolk, Virginia. It went back to Newport News.
We are on a hype train. If you want to help support the hype train and get it to a higher level, help support the show, you can always use bits or gift subs or subscribe yourself. You can also link your Amazon Prime with your Twitch account, and you get a free Prime sub. So you can always use that and make Jeff Bezos give me money, which is always nice. Quasispec, thanks for 1,000 bits, 84% to level 1. I gotta fix that light real quick.
The experiment wasn't undertaken in Philadelphia Naval Yard. It was undertaken in Long Island Sound. The individuals who have variously been identified as being involved in the experiment, Tesla, John von Neumann, Albert Einstein, were not at the helm of the Eldritch, but in fact two Manhattan Project physicists, J. Robert Oppenheimer and Edward Teller, were at the helm of the Martha's Vineyard.
Oppenheimer, after helping create the nuclear bomb, decided to invent another devastating piece of technology. I don't know if he'd find that to be a great idea, but whatever. Magos Informaticus, thanks for 16 months, says, but is it possible? No. Stone Corbell, thanks for gifting a sub, and Raja, thanks for a 3-stream streak, 41% to level 2.
And there we have the effort that was made to conceal that fact, to conceal the fact that after Tesla's death, his paperwork was seized by 2 War Department officials who forwarded his documents, his schematics, his formulae onto the National Archives under the Alien Property Act, and then sent them to the most logical place on the planet to send them, which is where the world's leading physicists and electrical engineers were then gathering in Los Alamos, New Mexico, to build the atomic bomb. And that's where Tesla's paperwork is today. The papers of Tesla were never lost. They are still located at Los Alamos, and that essentially is the hidden history of the Philadelphia experiment, and indeed the larger history of the U.S. development of time travel, which is to say that time travel was the secret twin of the Manhattan Project, and it was undertaken by the Los Alamos physicists.
I'm glad you talked about the Tesla papers. I got a few comments to make on what you said. That first of all, you're right. They were never missing out. People, I think his niece said that the moment, right after he passed away, federal agents went to his hotel room and literally took away all his notes. So I wouldn't be surprised that they're sitting with, some government scientists somewhere or military scientists. Another very interesting, you said, the way extraterrestrials travel is via time travel.
You like my cheekbones today? Thank you. They're attached to me. I can't do anything with them.
And that's going back to what Dr. J. Allen Hynek said, where essentially they're skipping dimensions. And Bob Lazar always states that if we can
Bob
alter
Lazar's a huge scam artist. Bob Lazar's he's been on Joe Rogan. He's like the guy that goes around and says like, oh, I worked at Area 51 and I saw a UFO. He's full of fucking shit. He's a liar. He sucks. He's a scam artist piece of shit.
gravity,
Fuck Bob Lazar.
Things such as time travel, to force fields, to teleportation, wormholes, all become a reality. And this is my next question. I've heard a rumor, or from other people who've spoken about this, I don't know if you want to call it a rumor, it's just a suggestion, that we can only go back as far as the first time a time machine was brought here or used here. Do you know if there's any?
Are you getting that from the movie Primer? I know that Primer didn't invent that concept. That's a concept that already exists in speculative time travel fiction. But it's funny that this guy is talking about it like it's a rumor and not, you know, a theoretical concept that already existed. Bittergrin says, wait, I thought Tesla's papers were all owned by Donald Trump and used to build Project Looking Glass. These conspiracy theorists need to stop retconning things. We need to lock them all in a room and make them come up with a conspiracy theory of everything. They'll all be on the same page. Bumble Homestead, thanks for gifting a sub. 75% to level 2 on the hype train with a minute left.
Merit to that question, to that statement?
But that's kind of an elision on a practical constraint rather than a sort of a metaphysical certitude. And by that I mean some forms of time travel open up a vortal tunnel in time space, for example, Tesla teleportation, through which the teleportee is physically passing. After the advent of Tesla teleportation, were we to teleport somebody, sort of shoot them across the quantum bow and teleport them to a time before the advent of such devices, there was the practical constraint, there was the practical constraint of getting them home to the present, of getting them back from the past. But it doesn't relate.
That's why a lot of time travel things give them a recall device, like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series. Their time travel episodes had recall devices that were Mickey Mouse watches. Stone Corbell, thanks for gifting a sub. Getting us over level 2, 2% to level 3. Thanks for all the gift subs today, I appreciate it. Nemesaur isn't here, and Nemesaur is normally the big gift subber, so I appreciate people giving little gift subs. I really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you.
In any larger metaphysical way, in almost as if magic.
Time Cop, the TV series, also had some kind of recall device, I think.
In terms of the fact that there's some cosmic threshold that exists that you can't cross because the machines weren't in existence. It was just simply the practical problem of somebody being stranded in the past without the device to get home. It's not a sort of a cosmic certitude that there's a threshold that when you cross it, you can't time travel to before the invention of the device. That indeed is the problem with some of the devices, is you can't time travel before their development because you will strand the time traveler. That's why we developed, in addition to teleportation, the chronovisors of Ernetti and Gemelli into a holographic way of embedding somebody in a past event so that when the hologram was collapsed, they found themselves back in the present. That's why Dr. Sterling Colgate, who just passed away in 2013, developed plasma confinement chambers to use radioactive plasma to embed the time traveler in a past event. And
I don't know if I want to be surrounded by radioactive plasma.
And when that
sounds dangerous.
Localized quantum field effect wore off, the time travel was spontaneously returned to the present. So it was really very much a practical.
Kind of sounds like they're not time traveling at all. Sounds like you're creating some sort of holodeck of the past. It's all sci-fi bullshit, so it doesn't matter, but it's weird how he's describing it. Altered Undying says, okay, sorry about this, but I have an idea for a puzzle game. Have someone who can travel back in time but is ghostly and incorporeal. They need to walk around and find information that helps them solve puzzles in the present. I've always thought that there was, like, a real opportunity for some kind of game where you go back and forth between two different time periods and the stuff in the past affects the future. I know that's not what you're saying, but, like, anything like that where there's, like, a back and forth dynamic. I know there was a Spider-Man game that tried that once. That was like a crossover between regular Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099, I think. Ocarina of Time did do that. I've not played Ocarina of Time. I'm surprised more games don't do it. My first Zelda game was Wind Waker. Toreador with 50 bits says, it's mostly EM radiation, which doesn't affect humans. I mean, aside from popping up at hot dogs. Wait, popping ups at hot dogs if it's close to a water harmonic. I don't know what that meant.
Necessity.
6% to level 3 with a minute and a half left.
Of stranding the time traveler in the past.
Yeah,
as
that
a
game Quantum Break, that wasn't that also like a TV show or something?
Of not having
popping us like hot dogs. That makes sense.
Device to get home, not some kind of cosmic threshold that resulted from the time that the technology was developed.
You mentioned your father was involved, or he said something about, was it the Tesla papers or about the Philadelphia experiment? What was his involvement with the military, the government, or any of these people associated with these projects that essentially led you into the project which you participated in, which was Project Pegasus?
Yeah, my dad was brought into the U.S. defense community's response to the extraterrestrial presence several months after the famous July 1952 overflight of Washington, D.C., by 9 extraterrestrial craft that were clocked on radar at Langley Air Force Base as traveling at 7,000 miles per hour, which was far beyond our flight capability at that time. Specifically, he was approached at his job at the Okanite Company in Paramus, New Jersey, to...
All right, I'll move on to the next video. Let's see, I know we had him in a live action interview. Ooh, let's try this.
I used to get
This features William Shatner. Thank you for the hype train, everyone.
into a lot of sticky situations during our voyage on the Starship Enterprise. But I was...
Did he forget the name of the ship for a second?
You know, I used to get into a lot of sticky situations during our voyage on the Starship Enterprise.
Yeah, he forgot the name of the ship. What the fuck? You think he read it off of the toy they gave him?
You know, I used to get into a lot of sticky situations during our voyage on the Starship.
Look at he's reading it. You were on the show for like 3 or 4 years, and then you did the animated series, and then you did 7 films. You did 7 Star Trek movies, and you don't remember the name of the ship? Come on! It's probably a bit. You don't know William Shatner.
I used to get into a lot of sticky situations during our voyage on the Starship Enterprise.
He's in his 90s. He wasn't during this clip. This clip is from decades ago. This clip is like 20 years earlier.
You know, I used to get into a lot of sticky situations during our voyage on the Starship Enterprise. But I was...
Nyborg is a hell of a drug? I don't get it.
Always able to get out of them like this. Ah, see what I just did there? And I didn't even have Scotty to beat me up. But can we somehow transport ourselves from one location to another in an instant? Things like that are science fiction, right? Wrong. 1960, suburban New Jersey.
I love recreations.
6-year-old Andrew Basiago was about to have the most
reenactments.
incredible day of his life.
My dad called out to my mother and said, "Hon, I'm taking Andy to the hardware store." Instead, he drove me up to the old aeronautical company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey, a large defense technical experimental area that dated back to World War II.
As they enter the facility, Andrew wonders why his father Frank would bring him to a place like this.
I didn't know what was happening.
Andrew's dad leads him to a secret room. Inside is something unlike anything he's ever seen before.
It was so strange. It essentially consisted of two elliptical-shaped booms that were about 8 feet tall and about 10 feet across.
It's a machine that's beyond Andrew's comprehension. Whatever it
Did they have the show, people on the show have to draw these little fake schematics?
is, his father is clearly in charge. But why? And what is it for?
Had the technician turn the device on.
As Andrew watches, the booms begin to spin, generating a strange cascade of energy.
That looked almost like water falling in a public fountain. It was a very beautiful, sort of shimmering field of energy.
Again, that's just Stargate. You're just describing fucking Stargate. For those, I haven't even seen Stargate, and I know that. Hold on. Like when they turn on the Stargate, it's all like liquidy. Oh, Stargate, the whole ass movie's just on YouTube, and it has been for 6 years. That's probably illegal. That's funny. Where's the scene with the fucking Stargate? Yeah, here we go. See the part where they turn it on? Yeah, it's like a liquid thing. It's like mute that. Yeah, see, it's like liquid, but it's not. It's like a portal. It's a cool effect, but you know, it's not real life.
As the energy field from the machine grows, Andrew's dad does something incredible. He tells his son to take his hand, then the unimaginable happens.
We counted down, 1, 2, 3. On the count of 3.
And I know the official Pokemon channel uploaded the entire first movie to their channel. At least I think it's the official channel. I didn't know that. A lot of the Tokusatsu people put a lot of their stuff up too. You can find most seasons of Metal Heroes subtitled, a decent amount of Kamen Rider on YouTube. Speaking of which, I don't know if anyone else is a Kamen Rider fan, but the new season of Kamen Rider is releasing in the United States, subtitled concurrently with its Japanese release, which is really exciting. I know no one else gives a shit.
We jumped through the field of energy.
Normally you gotta wait years for it to get like unofficial subs or something, but they're actually doing a global release. Exciting.
We seemed to be moving, and I could ultimately see a point of light in the distance. And that light reached us very quickly and accelerated. And when the light hit us, we were elsewhere in the country. Now, my father didn't tell me where we were going. In fact, we were jumping 2,005 miles through this vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space.
I don't know, maybe I'm just not a parent, but I wouldn't take my child through an experimental jaunt machine.
To the state capitol grounds in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
It's an astonishing claim. Did two humans actually transport from New Jersey to New Mexico in the blink of an eye?
No.
What happened to Andrew and his father? Is his story just the wild fantasy of a 6-year-old? Basiago
No, it's the wild lie of an adult con artist.
believes there is only one answer.
I think I must have teleported. Imagine traveling through the Lincoln Tunnel in New York City at 10,000 miles per hour without any on.
Like in Men in Black. You're just cribbing things from movies again. That's a scene from Men in Black. Altered Undying says, is that a reference to the Stephen King short story, The Jaunt? Yes.
The mobile around. That's sort of what it was like. We were physically moving through a vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space.
Wait, are you sure that's King and that wasn't Ray Bradbury? I thought Ray Bradbury was The Jaunt. Am I crazy? Let me look this up.
Had Andrew's father, Frank, invented the world's first teleportation machine? And if so, why?
Oh no, okay, it is Stephen King. For some reason I was thinking it was a Ray Bradbury story. I don't know why, but yeah, it's King.
Frank Basiago was no ordinary dad. During the Cold War, the U.S. and Soviets raced for military superiority.
I think it's probably because I don't really associate Stephen King with sci-fi, and it feels more like a Bradbury story to me, but that's interesting.
Frank was head of a top-secret American research team who were conducting experiments into teleportation. But why did Frank use his son as a guinea pig?
I think my dad's immediate goal in inviting me to teleport was to show that if teleportation was safe for his son, it was safe for anybody's child. And I was in it as a child, just as, for example, a child may have been aboard, one of Columbus's boats, or may have been an office boy to the Wright brothers, or an assistant to Thomas Alva Edison.
I don't think any of those are good comparisons to the story you're telling, if I'm being honest. I know this isn't real, but if it was, you're painting your father as incredibly irresponsible.
After the success of his experiment, Frank Basiago decides teleportation is too important to keep secret. He wants to tell the world, but the U.S. military disagrees.
Like, straight up, this would change warfare forever. Logistics are how you win and lose wars, so the idea that you could create an instantaneous supply line anywhere in the world and transport anything anywhere, goods, ammunition, food, other supplies, you would never lose a war again. And frankly, the United States has lost some wars, so I don't think this is real.
And so the unfortunate history of U.S. teleportation is that it has remained essentially a military secret ever since. Today, I'm leading the Truth Campaign. I'm urging the United States government to declassify teleportation to allow people to teleport between major world cities. The way I see it, I have a duty simply to stand in my truth and tell it.
Did Frank Basiago invent a machine that could instantly transport us across the world, or even to other dimensions? Is teleportation possible?
I wouldn't like to be the first one to be teleported. I would worry to end up maybe like a Picasso painting.
A boy enters a teleportation machine and is suddenly transported thousands of miles in seconds. Is human teleportation possible? Raymond Lovelock is a physicist. He thinks the idea we can teleport our bodies is simply fantasy.
It seems that the laws of physics are more constrained than the...
It's interesting that they're just making this video about the teleportation and not the time travel, despite him telling this exact story in other contexts as a time travel story. It's almost like he's a cynical con artist who's willing to go anywhere if they'll pay him to talk about his bullshit.
Imagination of human beings. The first idea that we have when we think about teleportation is the Star Trek idea. Beam me up, Scotty. The idea of taking a person, suddenly disintegrate in some form and reappearing up in a space station. Now, this is something that happens in science fiction.
But incredibly, although Lovelock dismisses the idea that people can teleport, he does believe it can happen in other ways, because he was one of the first scientists to do it.
We're not teleporting matter from one location to the other. We're really teleporting information.
Wait a second. Teleporting information? How is that
He's going to talk about entanglement.
any different than sending an email?
When we send an email, or even when we talk on our cell phone, the information goes from the sender to the intervening space to a receiver.
Remarkably, Lovelock has been able to teleport information without it traveling through any device at all.
What has been teleported is one quantum bit of information, or qubit, is sent from one location to the other. It has happened in nuclear magnetic resonance, where the information has gone from one atom of a molecule to another one. But it has also appeared in optics, where people have put information or quantum information in a particle of light called photons, send it to another location a few kilometers away, and then made it reappear over there. We've been able to teleport a few kilometers, taking one particle of information and make it reappear a few kilometers down the line. We've been able to do this.
It works like this. In the world of quantum physics, even the tiniest particles are somehow connected.
Oh yeah,
even
that's Shatner.
Across huge distances. In quantum teleportation, such entangled particles can literally be in two places at once.
Absolutely amazing that we can teleport. In quantum teleportation, it seems to disappear here and reappear there. It looks like a piece of magic, a piece which we're not used to. Once we have technology based on quantum entanglement, on quantum teleportation, maybe we'll think it's very familiar and banal. But today, for us, it looks something very unusual.
This technology
Bittergrin
could soon be
says,
used
entanglement isn't teleportation. It can't
to
violate
instantly
causality.
communicate with spaceships, no matter how far away. Or send military communications that are impossible to intercept.
We're just at the beginning of understanding what is quantum teleportation, how it works.
We may be able to teleport information, but does Andrew Basiago's story mean we can do it to ourselves?
No, he's a liar.
Laflam thinks not.
You must have a secret that I do not have to be able to do this. But I wouldn't like to be the first one to be teleported. I would worry to end up maybe like a Picasso painting.
If human teleportation isn't possible, what happened to Andrew Basiago? Was his incredible journey just a figment of childhood imagination? Bruce Goldberg is a hypnotherapist. He thinks
Why are we talking to a hypnotherapist?
stories like Andrew's are very real.
Oh, yeah, the hypnotherapist believes a lot of bullshit. I'm fucking shocked.
We have ancient literature going back thousands of years to people who've teleported.
Oh my god, he's a dental surgeon / hypnotherapist. Now that's a man I trust.
There are a lot of religious cases, but there are also secular cases too. I think teleportation exists.
But how? Goldberg believes he's discovered the secret.
Unironically, the other stuff would make me concerned about him fixing my teeth, and I need some teeth fixing.
First discovered teleportation while working with patients. People were described disappearing from one location. One gentleman went from New York City to Paris in an instant. I mean, he disappeared. His wife was sitting in the same room and telling me, yeah, my husband disappeared. I don't know where he went, and I was right there.
At first, Goldberg doubted his patients.
So then I started doing research about
the teeth are close to the brain. Only the mouth teeth. You don't know what teratomas people have.
Teleportation cases. These are psychologically stable people. I know them. I know their families. And they weren't on drugs, okay?
But as he continued his research, Goldberg's patients began to describe their teleportation experiences in remarkable detail. And they all had one thing in common.
You see first just a little bit like tunnel vision, and then all of a sudden you appear whole. The people look exactly like we do. Some of the people that I meet are recognizable. I know who they are.
Wow, this guy should get sued into oblivion for what he's doing to his so-called patients. Lamal411 with tier 1 for 6 months in advance says, 18-month sub baby. Oh shit. This sub baby's name is going to be Andrew McMartin. Andrew McMartin.
Incredibly, the people they encountered were replicas of themselves. The hauntingly similar experiences led Goldberg to a stunning insight.
When you teleport, you leave this universe and move into a parallel universe. Parallel universes are sister universes that exist alongside ours. Your DNA is exactly the same in your parallel life as it is here.
Are Goldberg's patients somehow being sucked into parallel dimensions and
No, they're getting sucked into the delusions of a person who has really weird issues and should probably stick to dental surgery.
and meeting their own doppelgangers?
Now this is getting really crazy. Is there more than one pill? Is there more than one you? Sounds nuts, right? Incredibly, physicists believe that these identical copies of ourselves might exist. Now, I don't really understand how this is possible, but if the eggheads say the math works, who am I to argue?
Do identical copies of each and every one of us exist in parallel worlds? Could we even enter those alternate realities?
No!
Bruce Goldberg believes the possibilities are staggering.
Let's say you have certain aspects of your life right now that you cannot change. Maybe you have an incurable disease. Maybe you have a criminal record. Maybe you've lost an arm. Well, in a parallel universe, that didn't exist. So instead of committing suicide or just going through life being depressed, you can actually switch universes and, in fact, have a much better life.
Are you serious? That's how you're trying to help people, is convincing them that they switch to a different universe where they're happy? Fucking do cognitive behavioral therapy. Do anything but this. What are you doing?
Do we all exist in other dimensions? Do we possess machines that can teleport us from one world to another?
No.
Could Scotty really beam us up after all? Weird.
Weird. Oh, boy.
Do we want to bring up our guest? Start getting into the
I'd love to.
meat of things?
I've been looking forward to this for...
Bittergrin says, but then aren't you forcing the happy you back into your shit life? It's survival of the fittest out here in the multiverse, Bittergrin. That depressed version of me should just get good.
Listening,
Yeah.
man.
Andrew
I
D.
just found out. Andrew. Come on, buddy.
Hey,
Hello.
Nice to meet you. Green guy with the $3 tip says, I feel like they say the same words so many times it loses all meaning.
Meet you, sir.
How you
Andy,
doing?
Nice to meet you. Your hands are nice and cold.
Good to see you.
Your hands are nice and cold. That's a weird thing to say, man.
I need to shake hands longer. Your hands are real nice and cold.
He said it a second time.
Oh, yeah,
Oh.
Michael's up too.
And Michael.
I'm sorry, Michael. I forgot you were coming up also.
Welcome, Michael.
You can tell this is legitimate by the copious amounts of alcohol they're consuming during this interview.
They're too cold to pinch this clip.
Yeah, they're kind of awkward sometimes.
Just shake hands with Adrian for a few more minutes. Your hands will warm right up.
There we go.
Yeah, they will.
Think I'm good?
So, I'm pretty unfamiliar on what brings you up tonight and what your topics are.
Well, I was a child participant in DARPA's Project Pegasus, which was the U.S. time-space program at the time of the emergence of different forms of time travel in the U.S. defense technical community. It's been concealed from the American people that time travel existed as the secret twin, essentially, of Project Manhattan, the atomic bomb project. Because at the time that Project Manhattan was being formulated, and some of the world's
The Manhattan Project.
leading physicists and engineers were being settled in Los Alamos, New Mexico, to develop the atomic bomb. Nikola Tesla's papers from his apartment in the New Yorker Hotel in Manhattan, New York, that had been seized by the War Department upon his death on January 7th of 1943, were forwarded by
If he has time travel technology, can a different version of him come and warn him about that comb over, that it's a bad idea?
the president from the National Archives to Los Alamos, and they're still there. Nikola Tesla's papers were never lost. 25 years later, by 1968, the U.S. defense community had pioneered Tesla teleportation, which is the capability to open up a vortal tunnel in time-space through which somebody can pass. And by the fall of 1970, had found a way to adjust the time of the arrival of the individual via teleportation, backward or forward in time. So I was brought in to Project Pegasus as a child participant officially in the fall of 1969. Today, I'm a lawyer in private practice in Washington State.
You think he ever brought that up in law school? Like they're just studying, I don't know, constitutional law, and he's like, hey, did I tell you guys about the time my dad sent me back in time to meet Abraham Lincoln 5 minutes before he got his brains blown out?
I've been for 20 years. For the past 10 years, I've been running my own truth campaign around the advent of time travel to inform my fellow citizens that we have some remarkable...
Also, I find it incredibly funny that people like this act as though if any of this was true, the government would let them go out and tell a bunch of top secret things to people. Like, if any of this were real, he would have gotten thrown out of a window 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
Technical capabilities that have been held back from the public that we could use to literally transform our society. And in the past year, My truth campaign about time travel has evolved into an independent campaign for president of the United States. I will be a candidate in the 2016 elections for president. I haven't announced yet, but I do it.
Damn, we could have had Andrew Basiago as president instead of what's happening now. Sit there and tell me with a straight face, wouldn't have been as bad. Or would have been worse. Would not have been worse. There's no way.
Intend to run.
Now, as
what's our feeling on the balance of believer versus grifter? I don't know. He keeps giving the same basic talking points, which makes me think grifter. He seems closer to like sorry, excuse me. He seems closer to that UFO disclosure guy than anything else, so I think grifter.
When you say independent, are you meaning independent of the two major parties or independent of all parties?
I mean I'm going to be running in a completely independent, nonpartisan, trans-ideological campaign as a write-in candidate, because when I investigated running for president, I even found that it's become cost prohibitive to even get on the ballots. It's going to cost $3 to $5 million just to get on the ballots around the country. So I'm going to be running an internet-driven, a YouTube-supported independent candidacy as a write-in candidate. And I'm going to get around the black box voting scandal by having all of those who vote for me as a write-in and my vice president, or my vice presidential running mate, to send a postcard to my campaign headquarters indicating that they voted. And then those will be accounted by a major Big 8 accounting firm and will determine whether the presidential election is in fact being rigged.
I don't know if a major accounting firm is needed to count like 6 postcards.
But the bottom line is that it's become simple.
Who's his running mate? RFK Jr. It's actually himself from the future. So his vice president is going to warn him about all the mistakes he made the first time.
Cost prohibitive for any independent American to now run for the highest offices in our land. And I'm going to be running as an independent in a way that will prove that in 2016.
I think that's good. You know, I mean, the Republicans and Democrats certainly have a stranglehold on, you know, the political gridlock in Washington. At least it seems to me. But I really don't want to devolve so much into
that was a very yes, politics statement. Like, you know what I mean? Like a person who's not connected to politics at all, but they know certain buzzwords, and they're like, yes, the Democrats and Republicans have a stranglehold over the gridlock in Washington. Feels like a Mad Lib of trite observations about politics. You know what I mean? Congress!
So we tend to go that road a lot on this show.
Right.
And I'm kind of sick of it, and what you're talking about sounds intriguing.
That's fair.
So I guess I'd like to start first with the basic science of the time travel and teleportation, because I've always just kind of understood it as a basic that the only way to travel in time is to go at the speed of or faster than the speed of light, which is impossible for things with mass.
That's not true.
Okay. So how...
It's impossible for energy to go faster than the speed of light as well, so mass isn't even...
Is that?
The thing.
Nikola Tesla discovered a form of energy that he found was latent and pervasive throughout the entire physical universe. He called it radiant energy. Radiant energy is not the ball lightning that he was throwing around his laboratory and that Andrew Carnegie and Mark Twain and some of his other friends would play with. He kept it secret. He had been experimenting with it beginning as early as his famous stay in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1899.
That's a big beer. Jesus Christ. What's the ABV on that?
My late father, Raymond F. Basiago, recapitulated his experimentation with teleportation when he was a special projects engineer at the Thomas A. Edison Research Laboratory in West Orange, New Jersey, where my dad was employed from 1956 to 64. When you array radiant energy and somebody jumps through it, their inertia opens up a vortal tunnel in time-space.
Their inertia opens a vortal tunnel in time-space. Why?
There is no...
What's a vortal tunnel? H-Baird says, this would be a good sitcom plot. A person has to share an apartment with themselves from the future. They pretend to be twins and hijinks ensue because one always knows what's going to happen, but has to decide when to step in and when to let things happen. That was actually already a sitcom. It got canceled. It was a sitcom, I think, in the 90s or early 2000s. It's a guy who's like an adult, goes back in time, and is a roommate, or like rents a room in the house when he was like a teen. I don't remember the name of it, but it existed.
No transformation of the individual, and the individual does not have to be traveling at the speed of light. The only speed qualification was that when we jumped through the field of radiant energy, we had to be traveling at a meter per second, or whatever part of us didn't get through that field of energy within a meter per second would be lost. We would be dismembered if we didn't leap through very quickly with our limbs crunched up in front of us. In fact, there was a
Kind of seems you'd probably use a vehicle then, like Back to the Future or Time Cop.
mishap when I was a child on the project. One of the boys teleporting with us to Santa Fe arrived standing in a public fountain with 3 inches of water and was effectively lost his feet because the specific gravity of the water was greater than the air around us, and what was below the surface of the water arrived a split second later. And he essentially slid off his ankles, and when I ran past his location I could see his feet in the fountain, and he was writhing on the ground with stumps for legs.
That is a deranged story to tell. Kudos for a pretty good body horror, like, time travel story. Total bullshit. Deranged to think about. But I don't know, that's not bad. Bittergrin with 50 bits says, I have no idea what Vortal Tunnel means, but I'm stealing it for Magi Babble in D&D. Perfect.
For feet.
If you're not using my streams of Tinfoil to steal ideas from for D&D, what are you doing?
So what the public and knowledgeable people such as yourself were not told, because it's been a state secret since teleportation was reduced to practice around 1967-68, about 25 years after Tesla's death, is that this energy exists and it has special properties that enable us to open up a vortal tunnel in the fabric of time-space itself. We tend to think of space as a void. However, as the physicist Mark Cummings has noted, a cubic meter of space is so dense that it has as many ergs of energy in it as all of the grains of sand on every beach on Earth. In other words, space is densely packed. That's one of the reasons why, and energetically speaking, that's one of the reasons why the planets stay in their rotation around the sun. As Buckminster Fuller...
It's gravity. What are you talking about? That's gravity.
...would say, we live in an omnipermative universe. And I think if we begin to conceptualize it in that way, that space is so dense that when you use this form of energy that's actually universal, the inertia was opening up that fabric of time-space and we were passing through it. And in fact, there was no need for a device at the end of our journey. What we would see was a pinprick of light at the end of the tunnel that was literally the outdoors as we were going through this microtubule, and then it would suddenly arrive very quickly and then hit us, and in several seconds we would find footfall thousands of miles away. So for example, we were jumping from the old Curtiss Wright Aeronautical Company facility in Woodridge, New Jersey. I mentioned the first time was in winter of 1968. I was
yeah, he's talking about the Aether. Yeah, conspiracy theorists believe the Aether is a thing. A lot of flat earthers believe in the Aether as well.
Later, my dad was taking me to a meeting with Dr. Harold M. Agnew, one of the Manhattan Project physicists, when he was the director of the W Division, the weapons division, at LANL, the Los Alamos National Laboratories. And
I'm actually going to, in another tab while he's talking, look up Vortal and see if it has any actual definition.
Must have taken only 3 to 5 seconds to go those 2,005 miles. Just last week, it took me 3 hours to fly on a commercial airliner between Charlotte, North Carolina, and I think the pilot noted 3 hours later that we were over Albuquerque.
Yeah, I'm not finding anything other than it being like, do you mean vortex? So maybe he just means something in relation to a vortex?
So there's been a 45-year cover-up of a transport technology that we could have used to literally allow the average person, the everyday citizen, to overcome the limits of time and space aboard our planet.
Okay, so I have a few quick questions just regarding the science. When you say a vortal tunnel, is that the same as a wormhole, or is that something different?
No, a wormhole, the characteristics of a wormhole, and there was one form of time travel called plasma confinement, that propagated about a 30-second wormhole. That, for example, I wormholed from spring of 1972 in East Hanover, New Jersey, to November 19th of 1863 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, via a time travel technology called plasma confinement. And that was a wormholing. A wormholing as depicted in the cult documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know? Wormholing involves a rapidly cascading branching in
Quasi-specs is it's kind of disturbing how much people only know science from movies, and science is in quotes. Yeah, I've discovered, especially within conspiracy communities, the amount of their worldview that has been constructed by projecting things they've seen in fiction it's honestly frightening to me. And I say that as someone who used film and movies and TV show as escapism as a kid because of the situation. I very much am invested in, like, the lore of fictional universes and stuff, but, like, I don't think they're able to draw a line, you know, between, like, hey, this is factual information and this is fictional information. It's not great. Adventuresin.net, thanks for a 5-stream streak.
a tunnel that's being opened up in time space.
Wait, you're a movie fan, Hannah? I know, I mention it so little. I'm not obnoxious about it at all.
That's kind of like a roller coaster ride that is ratcheting as you go. You go down a hill and then over, sort of like the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios. You're going chaotically in different hither and yon with a kind of a
I like that's the one example of a motion simulator ride he could think of.
Cascading series of little blips along the way. We were not wormholing when we would jump between Curtis Wright in New Jersey and the Santa Fe State Capitol grounds, and then later in the day, week, or year be transported to the Sandia National Laboratory where there was a Tesla teleporter that we would use to jump home to the tarmac at Curtis Wright. We were just...
Sheba Hawk, thanks for a 44-month streak, says, activate the vortal tubules and send my inner being to the void. Do you overstand? I understand, comrade.
Simply going through a tunnel that was true and regular, and that was ultimately an oblate triangle. It was essentially a tunnel that was almost regularly circular, but you could see a slight triangulation. It was actually three-sided, but in a very oblate way. And that was being opened up by our inertia as it...
Why does he pronounce things so weirdly? Your brain being exposed to the fields generated by vortal portals so often causes damage to the gray matter.
...passed through the radiant energy.
See, I can technobabble too.
So when I try to... When my claims are validated by today's leading time travel theorists, I'm talking about professors of physics like Dr. Michio Kaku.
Sir, I promise you, as much as I have disdain for Michio Kaku, I promise you, he has never verified any of the stupid bullshit you're saying.
And Dr. Ronald Mallet of the United States, certainly Dr. Stephen Hawking of Cambridge, and Dr. David Deutsch of Oxford would be in that same category. They can't understand how teleportation time travel could be possible, because the very energy that's working the energetic effect to accomplish it in the physical universe, actually the holographic universe we're living in, is something they haven't been exposed.
The universe isn't holographic. Conspiracy theorists always misunderstand this. Your perception of the universe is sometimes described in sort of psychological terms as holographic, because, like, the material world exists, right? But there is always fundamentally a disconnect between you and the material world, because you can't directly experience it. You can only experience it through the sensations that you intake through your sensory organs, your ears, your eyes, your nerve endings, your chemoceptors in your nose and stuff that allow you to smell things, in your mouth that allow you to taste things. So when we refer to the universe as holographic, we're talking about, like your perception of the world is based on inputs and interpretations by your brain. It doesn't mean that this tissue doesn't exist and it's holographic. It means that my perception of it is subjective, right? Unless he's talking about a different thing. But that's usually how I hear it described in the psychological sense when we're talking about the world being holographic. They're not saying it's not real. They're not saying it's not material. It's just that there is always a limit to your perception because you are perceiving perceptions, not the thing, but your perception of the thing. And I know that seems like splitting hairs, but it matters because our perceptions are incorrect and can become confused often.
So it's like trying to explain swimming to what swimming is to somebody who's never encountered water. It's almost impossible to explain to them that Tesla's greatest contribution to applied science was the discovery of a form of energy that allows us to bend time-space to the point of opening tunnels up in it through which we can pass uninjured across great distances.
So the energy, the radiant energy, as you call it, is that similar to what people talk about, like dark matter or antimatter stuff that isn't?
I don't know. I was a time traveler, and now I'm a time travel whistleblower. But I'm a lawyer and writer, and now a candidate for president.
That's convenient that he, I don't know, the science answers.
I was never a time travel technologist. It could be. I think the most intelligent thing I found was in the works of Dr. Walter Russell. Let me see if I get this right. And that is that electricity converts space into energy, and negative electricity converts energy into space. In other words,
what's negative electricity? Is that a thing he made up, or is there an actual physics thing called negative electricity? Let's look this up. Let's see if I don't know a hypothetical science thing, or if that's a word salad he made up. Negative electricity, the electricity present in a body or substance that has excess of electrons as the electricity developed on a resin when rubbed with flannel. That seems very weirdly specific, and I'm guessing that's not what he's talking about. I don't know, though.
In other words, it was the application by Tesla of negative electricity that turned negative electricity into space, namely the Vortal tunnel that was being opened.
That's negative charge? Okay, so whatever he's saying is not that.
Opened up by the teleporter. But I haven't contrived this information. I had arrived professionally long before I came forward with this information. I came forward in 2004, actually here in the Northwest, in a presentation to about 40 friends and friends of friends at a
Bittergrin says he probably means negative energy, negative mass, which is a theoretical thing that could exist in Einstein's equations and would allow for actual warp travel or wormholes. It's never been proven as actually existing.
Local hotel conference center in October of 2004, simply because I knew that I was under an ethical duty to reveal this information, because the world may need teleportation to overcome the crisis of environment and development that seems to be upon us.
Yeah, and it seems to me, I mean, if we had that just as an American, development, as long as we didn't research or reveal how we came across it, I mean, that would be an incredibly powerful asset. I mean, you figure...
That's not how anything works. You can't release a technology and then expect no one anywhere to reverse engineer it. Like, this is fictional technology, so it doesn't matter either way. But it's weird that the host is like, what if we just used it but didn't tell anyone how it worked? That's where espionage comes in. That's where people would steal one or buy one and then reverse engineer it.
You're just, the OPEC in the oil embargo in the 70s wouldn't have mattered. I mean,
H-Baird says positive and negative charges are defined based on rubbing amber with fabric, rather. That's why even though currents are modeled as moving positive charges, what actually moves in a circuit are the negative electrons. Thanks a lot, Ben Franklin.
We have,
Ben Franklin was a man whore.
Basically unlimited.
He liked to sleep with older French ladies. And hey, if that's his thing, that's fine.
Travel, just you know, instantaneous teleportation?
Well, DARPA, which was ARPA when I was brought into the project as a third grader in the fall of 1969, its chief legislative mandate is to prevent military surprise. And I'm speaking out now because Tesla teleportation was not implemented on a mass level. In a sense, I'm still working for the project, not officially, but just as an individual, because if we don't implement
Is it working for the project when you whistleblow on the project?
mass system
The
of
project isn't real, so it doesn't matter, but it's funny to describe it that way.
Tesla teleportation with teleports around the country and the world, some other country or a rogue faction of a country, like a criminal organization or a terrorist group could. I think the analogy is to, let's say, the situation that police officers in New York City find themselves. If police officers in New York are are pursuing a fleeing felon, they have the legal authority to ask a taxi cab driver to step out of his taxi and take that taxi and pursue a fleeing felon. My analogy here is to the fact that if we don't implement a network of teleports and another faction does, they're going to have the power that the New York police officer has to grab that teleport and take it and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
To do a surprise attack on our country, or to do crimes that they would then flee from, if, let's say, it was an organized terrorist or criminal cell.
I'm going to have to pause real quick. We have a caller. Do you mind if we take it?
Sure. So I'm still working to protect my beloved country. I just wanted to emphasize that. The great American Republic.
He's trying to stop teleportation 9/11.
Hey, caller, you're live on the air. What's your name?
My name is Dave.
Hello, Dave.
Hi there.
Hi, Dave.
Hey, I was wanting to ask the guest a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was wanting to know, why were children used for the experiment? And two, did they use animals first to make sure this was safe?
I don't know whether they used animals. Of course, they used monkeys and so forth, chimpanzees in the space program. But there were 5 reasons that I was able to glean during my service and in later discussions with my father, who was one of the project principals, about why children were used. That's a great question.
What's the teleportation password? A second plane has teleported into the femboy.
Because clearly they were exposing to children, namely school-age children, to new, dangerous, and experimental technologies. I was one of them, and we were medically injured and psychologically traumatized. So let me explain what their motives were. First, we were experimentees. They told us that the reason they were having us teleport, beginning extensively in the summer of 1970, which was the summer after our 3rd grade, was that they were testing the mental and physical effects of Tesla teleportation on children, basically from stable, well-provisioned backgrounds. The kind of like the analogy would be to the children of the president and vice president.
No offense, man, but if you were in a household where they wanted you to go and be a time travel experimentee, you weren't in a stable household. Like, within your fictional story, that's not stable. Your family would have been crazy. Good news, none of this happened, but like, you think that the story you're telling paints your father as a normal guy?
In the event
Has he already mentioned the Philadelphia experiment? He has.
That they implemented teleportation on a limited basis to move our executive branch officials around the world, they wanted to know what the physical and mental effects on their children would be. Think of President Obama's 2 beautiful daughters.
Notably kind of a weird thing to say.
I was teleporting experimentally.
Oh yeah, he does claim he knows Barack Obama, and they worked together on this program, so I guess that's why. He's being weirdly familiar because he's claiming that he knows Barack Obama, because he said Barack Obama's in the time travel program too.
At the time, around the age they were when President Obama was elected in 2008, if you can think back. So every time when we would arrive in New Mexico, we would be physically examined and given a battery of about 2 hours of verbal and math problems, sort of SAT-like problems, at an old school site in Lamy, New Mexico. We would be bussed out there and be examined medically and cognitively. The second reason they needed to use children was that the chronovisors, which were the electro-optical devices that propagated moving holographic images of past and future events, were very sensitive at the time of their emergence. They would go on the blink, as a result of the vocalizations, the heartbeat, the blood pressure, the footfall, or an errant cough or sneeze or something from an adult participant. Kind of collapse like a picture on an early television set. They would go on the blink, on the fritz. So they could either use small adults or highly intelligent children, and because they wanted to train the next cadre of...
They would have gone with small adults. What is this, a fucking Spy Kids movie? They would have gone and recruited jockeys before they'd recruit children. H-Bird says he keeps saying it.
Actually, sir, we've been booked into a small theater in New Mexico.
Whoa, whoa, slow down there, maestro. There's a New Mexico.
Of adult, or the first cadre of adult U.S. chrononauts or time travelers, they decided to work with a group of gifted and talented American school children numbering 140. I was one of those 140. In fact, I was the second youngest of those 140, born roughly between 1957.
That is insane and hilarious that he thinks that 140 people could be involved with a secret time travel program as children, and he's the only one that whistleblows.
And 61.
Also, it sounds like there's storms happening, so if the internet cuts off and the stream ends abruptly, I apologize. I don't think we've gotten a severe weather warning or anything, but I do hear, I think, lightning. Although it could also be fireworks, but it sounds more... Nope, that's thunder. That's definitely thunder. Okay.
One. So we were also, in other words, necessities to the use of the chronovisor as a time travel device. And I mentioned that third, we were trainees. It was expected that after high school we would go on to the U.S. Naval Academy at Annapolis. And as Donald Rumsfeld explained to my father
Well, that didn't work out, did it? You became a lawyer.
One day at a bar.
Not even like a JAG lawyer, just a lawyer.
In New Mexico. He was the defense attaché to the project. We hope to send the kids on to the Naval Academy and use that as a pretext for future project activities. So we were clearly time-space cadets under the Navy, headed for the Naval Academy upon matriculation to college after high school. We were also what I call viewees, which is to say that they found when they were working with the perceptual quotient of adults and children in the intelligence community after World War II, just in conventional espionage, they found that children have more keen and accurate perceptions of things, especially that they haven't seen before, because adult perceptions are biased by the selection bias of what they've already seen. So
Yeah, I don't think that sounds true. If there was an actual study done to that effect, okay, fine, I'll accept it, but I find that to be bullshit. There's no justification you could give to make kids secret time agents. Like, it genuinely sounds like a bad kids movie premise.
They use the example of that if we send an adult time traveling to, let's say, the year 2160, and the adult sees somebody walking down the street with a holster, the adult will see a handgun in the holster. But when we send a child to that same location in 2016, the child comes back and says, no, it wasn't a pistol. The man had some kind of scientific implement in a holster on his belt.
Or adults could just be trained to pay attention.
So it was believed that because we were tabula rasa, because we were blank slates, we would be better, essentially, time travel espionage agents to the non-local locations that we were sent to. So that was the fourth reason. The fifth and final one, my father explained late in his life and when I was in my 20s, and that is he had worked with the initial group of the 3 Navy enlisted men who were sent through the Tesla teleport and asphyxiated because the tunnel they opened up was too long. But they continued in the early days of time travel to use Navy personnel, and they found that more than occasionally, one of the adult people who was trained to time travel would become insane because of the psychological effects of moving between timelines.
Why?
So in the same way that, let's say...
Why? What are the psychological effects? Explain.
Somebody raised from childhood is more comfortable scuba diving and moving from the terrestrial to the aquatic environment and back again without any stress. They wanted to...
I'm sorry, are you saying that they got the time bends? They got the quantum bends? Sure, fuck it.
Work with children so they would acclimate us to moving between our timeline and the past and future without any prospect that we would lose our minds in the process. So those were the 5 reasons I've been able to glean. I think that rather than looking at us as guinea pigs, which on one level we were, I think it's most appropriate, most accurate to say that we were child trainees with an expectation that we would go to Annapolis for our college years and then become the first cadre of U.S. chrononauts trained from childhood. That seemed to be the overall programmatic thrust of our participation.
I hope you caught all that, Dave.
I did. I caught most of it, yeah.
I forgot that was an answer to a question. It went on so long.
I was wondering, because I wondered how they find everybody up. Say someone came to me, hey, we got an experiment. It's kind of dangerous, so we need children. I don't think I'd be signing my kids up.
Right. Well, Dave, let me say this, and that is that I was involved in the program from 1968 to 72. And if you look back, the human subject experimentation protocols emerged around 74, 75. The MKUltra revelations under the Church Committee occurred in August of 77. And then the Torture Convention was passed later, I think around 1989 or something.
Sprayline says, I can't describe how much attention lone children would bring in so many situations. If a young child you don't know is wandering around without an adult, a lot of people would take notice. Depends on the time period. That's more of a modern thing, I think. Like, I think if in the 1800s some random kid was just walking around, I don't think people gave a shit.
So we were actually...
I don't know, though.
Being put at medical and psychological risk by our country, indeed at risk of accidental death or serious injury prior to the development of those laws and policies. And in defense of my dad's position, he even...
In a small town, I agree it wouldn't necessarily make sense. Yeah.
Said it to me once when one of his colleagues from Parsons flew out to Albuquerque rather than teleport out from Pasadena to northern New Mexico when we were there in the summer of 1973. He said, you know, Ray, my friend from work, is going to be flying out here because he's afraid of teleporting. I said, but Dad, you're involving me. I mean, I'm your son, so if it's dangerous, I guess you made a decision that not only you would put yourself at risk, but among your 5 kids, you know, me, the youngest. And I said, why have you? I actually confronted my father about why he had agreed to let me be brought into the program, because the program had determined for its own reasons that I had to be involved. I think because the team members in the year 2045 said, look, Andy's got to be involved because he remembers everything that happens, he writes the books about the project, and he then seeks and wins high office and implements Tesla teleportation. So he's got to be...
They're bootstrap paradoxing from the future that he has to be a part of the program, because if he isn't, then he can't do the crackpot circuit, so he must
be a participant. And my dad said something very intelligent. He was an intelligent, loving, thoughtful father and human being. He said, son, every time human beings move to some other environment, whether it's just a location or a new era of human history, you know, even if it's something as simple as fleeing their island home because of a volcanic eruption or to find better hunting grounds, human beings have always put their kith and kin, even their toddlers, their babies, on their shoulders and forded streams and oceans and sought a better future for their children.
Okay, but this isn't that. In this hypothetical, he's just testing experimental equipment on you. I feel bad that in this story he's being abused and he doesn't realize it. Again, none of this happened, so like whatever, but it's weird that he's constructing this story in a way that makes his dad seem like a crazy asshole.
That's part of the human experience. And look, I knew that this is what the future holds, that your children will be regularly Tesla teleporting from point A to point B around our planet. So I've involved you because I believe in you, and I know that you have the strength and capability to pioneer time travel involving children. And so I brought you along because I've put you on my shoulders and I've taken you into that world, and you're being given the opportunity to do things and see things that most people in my generation will never have the opportunity to do and see, but that you and your children's generation will. And so I really love my dad, and he's really, well, as people will see as the story emerges in my book and so forth, my dad is not an ogre or a villain. He's actually one of the heroes of the story, because he and his longtime friend and former girlfriend in New Mexico, Connie Chavez, were using me to release the information from the inside of the project, but on a delayed basis time-wise. In other words, they were carrying out an illicit release of the information on a delayed basis through me because they were informing me of everything. I have information about every technology that was operational, every modality of time travel that was fully operational by 1970, and I'm developing and I'm telling people about it. I've now done 15 television shows, over 100 radio shows. In California recently, I was recognized by two brothers who were visiting Los Angeles from Scotland. My story has been heard not only by over 100 million people in North America, but by 50 million people in Central and South America through the good graces of...
I'm sorry, he's claiming a third of the people in America have heard his story? Bullshit. 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 Just a Peach with the tip says, I was wondering what made him have to involve his dad. Him being the youngest of 5 makes it make sense. He needs to see himself as special in his dad's eyes. I'm thinking the same thing.
Of Jaime Maussan, the Mexican television journalist, the Mike Wallace of Mexico. So the story is now reaching the entire world, and I'm overjoyed and I'm at peace right now in my life because I'm implementing what my late dear father asked me to do, which was after his death to tell the entire family. I have a large family. I'm the youngest of 7. And then after you tell the family and explain what we were part of, because it was great, it was a momentous set of developments in applied science, then tell the entire world. And that's what I've been doing primarily through the internet, but now through television and radio. So my dad, I'd just like to emphasize, he's one of the heroes of the story because he was actually utilizing me not just to be one of the child pioneers of time travel, but to be the person who would take the information to the world, and I'm doing so.
How did your family take this?
I guess I want to get to the caller so we can clear up the line if need be. Dave, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks,
Thanks, Dave. Good question.
So how did your family take this?
Well, my mother was...
How did he get 2 more siblings in 5 minutes? Time travel's crazy. All sorts of paradoxes. Stuff changes all the time in his personal timeline. I don't know if anyone's seen the movie The History of Time Travel. It's reminiscent of that. Hold on. There's a movie called The History of Time Travel, and it's pretty good. It takes the form of a documentary, but the documentary, you're seeing it from sort of a objective point of view, but as the documentary goes on, the timeline is changing. So, like, the story they're telling keeps changing timelines. It's really interesting. It's an interesting little meta movie. I'd recommend it. It appears to be on YouTube. Right here, I think. The History of Time Travel 2014. Yeah, this is it. It's very low budget, but it's a fun little movie if you like time travel stuff. There's also another tip. Green guy with a $3 tip says, I really need to work on my magic abilities to help the world, but this guy is sounding crazy. You think? Oh, where'd he go?
I was dying of cancer when I began to focus on my memories beginning around the year 2000. She had developed breast cancer in 1997, and she perished from breast cancer in May of 2003. I hate to really say this because it really shows to what... I mean, I took care of her during those 6 years, so I'm glad that I could be her primary caregiver. But I also was obsessed with what had happened to me because I began to focus on what happened to me in 2000. I'd never forgotten my memories, but I began that process of going back and writing down what happened. And
isn't there about age 30 where things start to come forward, things that you get, especially through mind control?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Memory is related to hormones. So when males go through that gradual loss of testosterone after 35, especially between age 35 and 40, which is precisely my age when the memory started not so much coming to the fore, but where I began obsessing about my childhood and remembering, not remembering them, but...
Oh, God! Did he, quote-unquote, recover these memories in his 30s? Oh, no.
But focusing on them, that precisely corresponded to that return of childhood trauma and memory that begins at around age 35. Some people, in fact, have midlife crises around that time because of some things that have been buried from early childhood. So I began to focus... I was 35 in 1996, so certainly by 40, by 2001, I was deeply immersed in the process of writing down what happened. And you almost come off as sort of, not schizophrenic, but sort of bipolar when you're in that situation, because you're going for a maximum amount of detail and so forth. My mother knew everything. In fact, what I was going to say was I felt a little bit bad that on her deathbed, I said, "Mom, you knew everything, didn't you?" She said, "Yes."
Carpkosian says, I had an abrupt loss of tea a couple of years ago. Hannah will in 2 months. For those that didn't hear, I got a date for my orchiectomy. Very exciting. I do already take tea blockers, so I'm not dealing with a lot of tea, but they'll be gone, and I can stop taking the tea blockers after that, which is good because they make me have to pee a lot.
And this is literally a few weeks.
Speaking of which, I'm really sorry. I gotta go pee real quick. While I'm gone, Cher will tell you about, Inside number 9. I'll be right back. Don't leave. You're not allowed. I'll find you like a Terminator.
Weeks before she died, and I said, "You knew about the teleporting to New Mexico?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "That big fight that you had with Dad in summer of '71 where you broke the doorknob off the master bedroom door, that was because he had told you that he had involved me in teleportation and time travel. Is that correct?" And she said, "Yes." And what she said was that was then. She was starting to worry about me, that I was getting sidetracked because I was obsessing about what had happened to me, when in fact I was starting my life's work, which was the process of waging my truth campaign about time travel having been achieved by 1970. Multiple modalities of time travel having been achieved when we were children. With my 4 older siblings, there was a split. The 2 that were coast-to-coast listeners were accommodating and attentive and were just listening. And
Coast to Coast with Art Bell is a conspiracy show, just so you know.
And the 2 that weren't coast-to-coast AM listeners were very reactive and judgmental.
By the way, that was one of your first major
venues.
Venues for outletting this story.
Yeah, and so let's dedicate tonight's show to George Norrie, because if it was not for him, my story would not have reached the mainstream. So I've now done 7 appearances with George, and he's
back at being 1 of 5 again. I think he's including his parents. When he said he's part of a family, I think he was saying he's part of a family of 7. So I think he has siblings. Well, no, because he said he has 5. No, he's 1 of 5 siblings, 2 parents, 7. That's where I think the numbers are coming from.
Wonderful to work with, and definitely another champion of the story, another American hero. But what I learned is what we had been told when I was trained on Project Pegasus as a child came true in a big way. I've now had about 2,000 major arguments with strangers on Facebook about my claims.
That's kind of a sad thing to admit. I've argued with thousands of people about my nonsense delusions. Oh, good use of your time.
We're told that if we told anybody outside the project, including our brothers and sisters, kids in the neighborhood, kids at Sunday school, kids in class, there would be 3 reactions, and also with adults, obviously, our aunts and uncles, whatever, the guy down the street, whatever. Either people would believe we were lying, and there's not a good reaction to liars socially. There's a negative response to lying or perceived lying. or people would believe we were crazy, or the person would grudgingly believe us and be envious that they were not involved. And that is what has happened in the public realm. I've had, again, probably about 2,000 major battles online with people who are
major battles is what he's calling his internet arguments.
Exhibiting one of those traits about my claims, so that when I ultimately, as a skilled trial lawyer, blow them away and prove what I'm saying, because my story is true, they ultimately sort of drop out of the argument by ultimately saying, well, you're just a liar, or you're crazy, or gee, you know.
I'm sorry, is that dropping out of the argument?
Something I believe you now, and I really wish I was involved. So I found that I had to practice something I hadn't learned in life, which is forgiveness. I had to learn to forgive my disbelieving siblings. I had to learn to forgive my college buddies who told me to see a psychiatrist. They thought I had become derailed. But in fact, I was simply another American who had had a non-ordinary set of experiences in childhood in the direct implementation of the lost technologies in the lost papers of Nikola Tesla.
I should mention, I met Andy back in 2004, so I've actually known this story for quite some time, and he lived with me for some time as well. So, and in fact, I was back...
One of my patrons.
Yeah, back in
Carol.
those days when he was actually uncovering a lot of this thing. But I can tell you, I've seen a lot of things, and when he first went through the story with me, and when he first...
Who's this guy? A friend of his, apparently. Former roommate?
Explained everything. And I sensed that there was something real about this story. It took me a couple days myself to to integrate this. And I'm reminded about the comment that Ben Rich made. Ben Rich was a guy who ran the Lockheed Skunk Works. And he said, we are 50 years beyond anything you could possibly imagine. In other words, the technologies that we actually really have are so far beyond what you might see in Star Trek. He said, we've been through Star Trek and beyond, in other words, in terms of the technologies that we have. So the most American people and most people in the world have no sense as to where we're really at, and there's a deliberate reason for that, because a lot of things get suppressed.
Just a Peach with a tip says, when I was a kid, my dad would listen to Coast to Coast when we were driving during vacation. My dad would debunk the stuff or just laugh at the people. I wonder why I like watching you. Not.
A lot of things happen in black projects, so we don't get this knowledge out that this stuff really exists. I myself was in a hotel room a year ago, and a guy had a transformer, and he had all the gauges hooked up to it, and I saw a transformer that produced over unity. In other words, it was putting out more power than was being put in.
Oh no, he fell for a perpetual motion device!
You know, so I've seen technologies like that, but those kinds of technologies you never hear about. Those technologies have been suppressed.
Now, why would they want to keep it a secret? I mean, with so much money to be gained, you know, and so much benefit to come to people, you know, and I would also say, I mean, from what I know of Tesla, he always wanted his technologies and powers to be used for the good of the people.
He did.
So
Right.
why would they, you know...
Well, I can answer that. What happened is, Tesla died on January 7th of 43. There was a team of War Department officials, 2 War Department officers, and 2 FBI agents who were racing to his suite at the New Yorker Hotel to seize his paperwork, any prototypes in the laboratory, his formulae, mathematical formulae, schematics of his inventions. So the War Department seized his paperwork, forwarded it to the National Archives, but then it was sent to the most logical place on the planet, namely Los Alamos, and became the secret twin of the Manhattan Project.
It's kind of crazy to me that he's claiming that, like, on top of developing nuclear weaponry, on their side time, all of the physicists, who, again, were spending all their time trying to develop nuclear weaponry, also in their spare time developed time travel. That's his story. Is, by the way, we also developed time travel.
Attended a lecture in the winter-spring time frame of 1971 at the Cerrillos Cultural Center site. There was an underground amphitheater there. Now you can look down on it from the surface and see it if you visit that site. The roof is missing because there was a fire there. And Donald Rumsfeld, who at that point had not yet served twice as defense secretary, he was simply a former Navy pilot during the Korean conflict and a former congressman from the suburbs of Chicago, gave about a half-hour lecture in which he explained, as he said, that the The primary purpose of teleportation is military.
No, he's not claiming there was a separate team.
It will
He's
allow
saying the same people who were working at Los Alamos on Manhattan Project also developed time travel.
us to put troops precisely where they are needed on the battlefield. And then he explained how the Defense Department, during its studies into what happened during World War II, found that the majority of our casualties were not killed on the front lines or in the rear areas, but in the middle ground between the rear areas and when they were moving up to go to the front lines, by things like friendly fire from behind, sniper fire from ahead, and let's say drowning with their packs in watery areas and that sort of thing, such as the marshes of France that we lost so many soldiers in Operation Market Garden in 44 and in Operation Varsity in 45 as we were invading Germany. So he said that Tesla teleportation will enable us to put troops precisely where they're needed and obviate that risk.
You wouldn't need troops. Trey pointed out earlier you could teleport a bomb into Hitler's bunker. Like, why? You wouldn't need to move troops at all. You could teleport bombs anywhere in the world at any moment.
About infantry.
It would fundamentally change warfare.
In other words, the tragedy of the secret history of U.S. time travel is that Tesla teleportation was weaponized from the very time it was obtained by the Defense Department in 1943. We had a war on, and that's where it has remained ever since. I mean, the Los Alamos National Laboratories, where Tesla's papers are, and where you need a secured clearance to read them, as my father had, was then and is now the leading bomb factory of the United States. It's a major part of the military-industrial complex. In the case of the other technologies, such as the chronovisors, that allow us to propagate holographic
big ball of scorpions or lava, fill a room with sand,
image
drown someone in their apartment with ocean water
of past and future events, and even send people there if they stand in the hologram when it's propagated. That
Karpkosian says that's not why Market Garden failed. The Nazis captured the plans, and also it was pretty fucking obvious with all the rivers in the damn area. Also, that was Belgium and the Netherlands, not France.
Gave the U.S. intelligence community an unprecedented advantage in the area of domestic and foreign surveillance, because they could see into a room not only in real time, but into a room that somebody had been in and hear the conversation 5 years ago, and what they might be doing or saying to somebody in a room 5 years from now. So
you talked about listening to George Washington, and through a device where, for example, picture a television screen where you can tune in to any point in time. What happens when you have time, either not just time travel capability, but the ability to go back and look at what happened at a given point in time? What does that do for, in terms of security and
that's the plot of the first part of The Invisible Ray, is being able to see any historical event.
What does that do to
The Invisible Ray is a really weird B-movie that you just goes in all sorts of weird places.
Shake up the world in terms of finding out what really happened in certain situations.
Yeah. Yeah, that was explained to us as well. The idea of even siting a military base is of strategic significance. So if you went back and found that there was massive subsidence there, you wouldn't want to see a military base fall into a sinkhole. So they even wanted to use chronovision in their simple planning of the deployment of the military-industrial complex, this militarized American society in which today 59% of the U.S. budget, this is one of the reasons I'm running for president, 59% of the U.S. budget is going to military spending, to so-called defense spending, but it's really just the perpetuation of this negative form of power that's administered by the military-industrial complex. So this is the tragedy of the secret history of time travel, and one of the major reasons I'm speaking out. These devices...
Didn't the first Doctor acquire a time television at some point? I know they watched certain events and stuff on a monitor in the TARDIS. Like, I know they watched the Beatles at one point, so yes, I believe so.
Devices which could revolutionize our civic infrastructure, which Tesla had been secretly working on from 1899 forward, which he kept secret even during that last kind of strange 15 years of his life where he was just ostensibly...
Also, can I just say to Doctor Who, really lucky that the band they featured was the Beatles. That could have aged so badly, but they happened to... they picked a band that stood the test of time, so good on them for that.
Raising pigeons. He was actually keeping this information secret from Edison from J.P. Morgan, from George Westinghouse, his nemesis in the world of invention, because he knew that in his mind and in his paperwork was the infrastructure of the human future. I mean, I visited...
Did he end up running for president in some form? He ran as a write-in candidate, so barely? I guess it depends on what you mean run for president. He wanted people to write him in, but he never officially got on any ballots or anything.
I was a child in Project Pegasus, the year 2045. And in that 2045, a time that today is only 30 years in the future, Tesla teleportation was so ubiquitous that teleport stations are as commonplace as elevator landings are in our civilization. So you could walk out of your front door, go to a teleport about the size of a public restroom down the street from you where your bus stop might be, punch in your information and jump to your downtown area and go to the building where you work.
Why would you need to... It's so interesting to me that even within the confines of his thought process for teleporters and time travel, he's so short-sighted. Why, if there's teleporters, would I have to work in a downtown area in a city? Can't I do work anywhere virtually? Couldn't I live in France and go to work in Australia? And, like, literally it matters not at all because distance is no issue if teleporters are a thing?
And then after working that day, walk down the stairs in your office building and go into another teleport, just like an elevator, and teleport home to your front yard. In other words, by 2045, Tesla teleportation is going to allow us to eliminate all of the forms of transportation that depend on the internal combustion engine, which are putting 60% of the human contribution to climate change in our global atmosphere every year. 60% of greenhouse gases come from the transport sector of the...
Sir, conspiracy theorists don't give a shit about the environment in a real way.
...greenhouse gases that we're responsible for as a human society.
Did you have any idea of what kind of energy would be involved in a teleportation? Let's say to go across the country?
It was radiant energy, except that it had been... We were just going through the Vortal tunnel that was propagated in a kind of a raw sense through this rudimentary device.
So you're tapping into that energy, but so what was there? Were you in a room or a building that had a massive amount of power?
No. In fact, the Tesla teleporter Curtiss Wright had kind of a double thick plug and
like a 220.
Yeah, an outlet on the wall that you might run, let's say, a small drill press or lathe with. It wasn't even industrial size. It was like what you might have in your garage to power.
Why did it need to plug at all if it's running off of this etheric energy? Why did it need to plug into the wall for anything?
Your saw. Yeah. And so it was not energy intensive, and yet the power of the radiant energy was incredible. It was numerous orders of magnitude above the combustion of fuel, of fossil fuels, to power, let's say, a commercial airliner, because the distance between Woodridge, New Jersey, and Santa Fe, New Mexico is 2,005 miles, and we were reaching that in 3 to 5 seconds with the power that was being derived from a small, home appliance size plug and outlet. But it was radiant energy again. What was so amazing about 2045 is when I said, how am I getting back to 1972? They said that. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense because that's the wall. And they laughed and they said, no, Andy, our teleports are actually recessed into bare walls. Let me show you. And he hit the wall, and this light showed up that was the square that I had to run at. And he could punch in the time. And he said, the only problem is that if you want to go home to 1972, you're going to have to overcome your natural fear or natural aversion to run at the wall with the fear that you'd knock yourself out. So he said, we'll give you a couple of dry runs, but you're basically going to have to run at full speed at that wall. And I did, and again, we were back in the Vortal tunnel that looked identical to the one that the shop model at Curtiss Wright produced, except rather than being in it for 3 seconds, we were in it for about 30 seconds to go back those 75 plus miles to 1972. And I was a saxophone player, so I found that kind of easy, just to inflate my lungs and kind of sip air off the top. It was Tesla teleportation. It was the same radiant energy. Now, they were getting us back from 2045 at the microwave tower array in the Lobo Overlook site, which is due west of the Continental Divide, up Highway 160 in southwest Colorado.
Can I ask him, why did he not stop 9/11?
If you go up the 3 miles up,
just curious,
up that serpentine road up to the Lobo Overlook, or what's called Microwave Tower Road, you'll find what we call Montauk Southwest, which is this huge antenna array. And it was explained to us, even back in the project days, that they were pinging into space so that the staff members in 2045 could locate our position in time-space and get us back to, October 12th, 1972
so
or whatever.
Some journeys where you went back in time. I know you went back to, like, dinosaur era.
Saw the dinosaurs in Arizona.
But there wasn't a teleporter.
You saw dinosaurs. Did you have an oxygen tank? The atmosphere's composition was entirely different.
Back there to get back. So how did that work where it just collapsed and faded?
Exactly. That was one of the technical limits, because with a Tesla teleporter, you physically tunnel through time-space.
Okay.
When we started Tesla teleporting, we were then transported by automobile, ultimately at the end of the day, week, or month, let's say, to an identical teleporter that existed in our time to jump from Sandia back to Curtis Wright.
Okay.
But we couldn't go to the time before the advent of the Tesla teleporter, its operational advent in 1967-68, because we would be stranded in time. So they had to develop ways to send somebody to the past before the advent of teleportation, be there for a while to have some kind of meaningful interaction with that quantum environment, and then automatically come home without the need for a return device.
Yep, okay.
And that's one of the reasons why a major thrust of Project Pegasus was chronovision. Because when the hologram propagated by the chronovisor naturally collapsed, or they collapsed it, we were in a field of supercharged particles called scintillation for about 90 seconds, and then you could start to see the other kids popping into view as initially as black body emanations, part of their arm, their leg, whatever, and then all the particles would clear after about 100 seconds, and we were back on the stage in New Jersey. That was also the reason that Dr. Sterling Colgate developed sending somebody to the past, as I was sent to Gettysburg on the day that Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address, via the plasma confinement chamber, because all the radioactive plasma did is create a localized quantum field effect that essentially embedded you temporarily in the past. And then when they wanted to bring you back, or when that effect naturally wore off, you then just transitioned. You wormholed there, but you just transitioned.
And came back into the same room in which
and
you
came
left.
back in the chamber.
Yep.
Oh, he's exhausting to listen to. H-Baird says, when he was looking at dinosaurs, he stepped on a butterfly and caused Trump to be elected. No, really, the plot of the original short story was that stepping on a butterfly caused the wrong person to get elected. Yes, that's The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury.
In fact, that's what I'm doing in the Josephine Cobb image of Lincoln at Gettysburg. My whole face is obliterated, even though the men standing in front of me talking who were closer to the camera, and the Union soldiers behind me protecting the dais where Lincoln had just arrived to deliver the Gettysburg Address, you can see their facial features and not mine.
Yeah, because the kid was moving. God damn it.
Because the photographer, who in all likelihood was Matthew Brady or one of his assistant photographers, literally captured me in that photograph as I was fading from view and going back to 1972. So you can see the right side of my skull, my right eye socket, and all of my teeth, not just my smile or the left side of my teeth.
Yeah, no, that's not what the picture looks like.
But my entire dentition is visible because I was turned all the way to the right with my head cocked a little bit further to the right, and the cameraman was over here. So he got like an x-ray of my teeth, even though Marie Curie, the discoverer of radium, and hence the scientist who made x-ray possible, would not be born for 4 years in 1867. So they developed ways, essentially.
Can we see the picture? Sure. Let me pull it up over in another tab real quick. Yeah, this is so dumb. What? Sorry, it didn't copy paste correctly. Give me one sec. Controls. There we go. It is what? It was in the preview. Oh, I see. You gotta do the stupid thing. It's this one. No, don't go to the full thing. It won't show it to me, you asshole. Stop it. Just show me the image bigger. So this one. It's the kid that's blurry in the center he's claiming is him. He's claiming that you can see, like, teeth and stuff. You can't. You can't see anything. It's literally just a fucking blurry nonsense because you can't see it. There you go. There's the kid. You can't see dick!
Essentially of embedding us in the past where we naturally came back without the need for a return device.
So in one of your trips in the past, they actually have photographed...
Yes, I was photographed on November 19th, 1863. I'm the largest person in the... well, almost the largest person in the shot. I'm standing with my back to the dais and my right foot in the opposite direction where Lincoln had just arrived on the right side of the dais where he gave the Gettysburg Address. And when this photograph was donated to the Library of Congress in a cache of photographs that had once been owned by Matthew Brady, the legendary Civil War photographer, a photo analyst at the Library of Congress named Josephine Cobb took her magnifying glass and found several pixels that show President Lincoln's face right as he was sitting down on the dais. I know he was just sitting down because I heard the incredible enthusiastic cheer for him. It was just gave me chills in my back as I heard it, as he probably got off his horse and walked up onto the dais. And at 6'4", he was certainly visible to everybody in the audience. There was about 1,000 people there, I would estimate. So that photograph was captioned, "Citizens of Gettysburg gathering to hear President Lincoln give an address." In fact, it was the Gettysburg Address. Now that's probably the most remarkable photograph ever taken, because until 2007 it was the sole surviving photograph of Lincoln at Gettysburg on the day that he gave his famous speech there. It's the first known photograph to show a time traveler from the future, namely myself, from a time lab in East Hanover, New Jersey, under the direction of Dr. Sterling Colgate, the president of New Mexico Tech, in spring of 1972, and my late father was also at that lab. And it's also a photograph that physically shows, in the very anomaly that was captured, consisting of how my face was portrayed and part of my skeleton, essentially,
No one can see your skeleton. Stop lying.
that I was transitioning out of the scene, even though, as an early photograph, you can see shadows of
no
people who walked
skeleton.
around, who changed location, as that early negative was being exposed. In fact, there's also an entity standing next to me. And let me mention something now that I didn't mention during the earlier show here tonight, which was that this is the only public historical photograph at the National Archives that's classified. When the photo analyst working with me, namely my fellow...
Not all that classified, since it's like literally posted all over the internet and you show it in videos that you're a part of. Like, what are you talking about?
U.S. chrononaut William B. Stillings, Brett Stillings, and John Gannon of Detroit, Michigan, went in search of that photograph in Washington. They were told that they would never be given access to the original photograph or negatives.
I mean, of course not. It's a historical photograph. You can't just have random assholes coming in to look at the original negatives of, like, historically relevant photos. They're not even trained to, like, handle that kind of thing.
Because it's the only public photo...
Does he literally think that just because random assholes can't come and put their grubby little nasty fingers all over historical relics, that means it's classified? It's not classified, you just can't go touch it.
Photograph of the National Archives.
They wouldn't let me put my grubby little fingers all over the original Constitution. It's all locked up in a case, so the Constitution is classified.
It's classified. Why? I don't think it's just because it shows Lincoln at Gettysburg. It shows the first time traveler from the future. It is already known to have been known as such in the future, because my story has been known since the early 70s as having been the breakthrough story revealing the time travel potential that our government developed in the early 70s. And it also shows me fading from view, and hence proves time travel. And it proves my earlier claims that I did transition from view right as the photographer was exposing his negative to the sunlight
Nemesaur,
beneath his...
You're here for like the last 10 minutes. Welcome.
out of his canopy. And also, there's standing next to me is this large... I'll say vaguely Asiatic entity that does not look human but looks extraterrestrial. So one of the shadow bodies in the photograph is right next to me. He's about a foot taller than me, and he looks like a gray extraterrestrial. So that must have been some interdimensional who was having his turn on his 21st birthday or something of going to see Andy on Earth, visiting Lincoln at Gettysburg or whatever. But it's not a human entity. It's another form of humanoid being.
Are there other pictures of the other kids or anybody that had traveled back or anything?
Not that I know of. There have been some anomalous out-of-time photographs. Dr. Bruce Goldberg talks about the one of the person from the Midwest who always wanted to visit the Grand Canyon, did so when they were growing up in the 1940s, and then went there in the 1970s. And when they came home and developed their photographs, all of the cars in the photos were from the 40s, as if they...
What? H-Baird says, I once time traveled back to ancient Samaria and tried to buy some copper from a guy named A. Nazir to fix my time ship, but the copper was terrible. I even wrote about it at the time, but the British Museum keeps it classified in a display case.
They had, their will had willed them back to the Grand Canyon location of the 40s, not the 70s. And I don't believe necessarily that some of the ones that are surfacing on the internet are time travels from the future. Like the famous one of the young man in the college sweater with the Ray-Ban photographs at that dam opening in British
They're
Columbia.
not Ray-Bans, they're sunglasses.
Yes. I'm sorry, but his clothing is from the 1940s, not our time. He's a young man from that time frame.
Do you remember what Lincoln's voice was like?
No, because I intentionally left the area around the dais right as Lincoln was arriving. In fact, shortly before he arrived, so I heard the cheer of the people of Gettysburg for the president when I already had my back to the dais and I had walked about 100 paces from the dais. But my father stood there dressed as a Pennsylvania farmer right in front of the president. And he said, I don't know what you were so concerned about, because I was apprehensive about standing there watching Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. He said he was just a man with a beard giving a speech. And I said, well, what did he sound like, Dad? And this is actually the very question that you're asking. And he said, well, that's one very interesting thing about going to see Lincoln give the Gettysburg Address. And this is, mind you, this is in the early 70s, before we knew that Lincoln had Marfan's disease, which is a degenerative disease of the connective tissue, where the connective tissue gets stretched, including arguably or presumably the tissues in the vocal cords. He said Lincoln had an exceptionally rural, twangy accent. And then he imitated President Lincoln. He said, it sounded kind of like this. 77 years ago, our forefathers brought to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So that's what Lincoln sounded like.
That's pretty good.
Thanks.
I heard a guy who was in
You forgot the party on, dudes.
his 50s. He said his grandfather, who was extremely old, was a little kid, and he got to hear Lincoln. And he said when Green Acres came on the first time he heard Mr. Haney, he goes, that's the voice. He goes, I'll never forget it. That sounds like Abraham Lincoln.
So it was only like in the 80s that they went back and they realized that one of the things the president was suffering from was Marfan syndrome. And that affected...
I know that that's been speculated. To be clear, I don't think that's ever been proven. But, like, he's been dead for a long time. How do you prove that? But it has been speculated that he had Marfan's.
The heart. Certainly the Abraham Lincoln that I saw walk into Ford's Theater during my 6 or 7 visits in summer of '71 to Ford's Theater on a mission to walk up to the balcony, up the balcony stairs and get behind their balcony seating, was a very thin and emaciated 56-year-old. On the night that Abraham Lincoln was shot, he was essentially a walking skeleton in his suit. He was extremely emaciated. So we think that he may have had cancer, he may have had congestive heart disease from his Marfan syndrome.
Maybe he was stressed out dealing with the Civil War.
But he was a very...
If there was any precedent that had a justification for being kinda stressed out and maybe losing some weight, I think it's maybe Lincoln.
Man. He may have just been maybe at that point from the stress of the war, who knows, not even eating. But he was, I would say, very close to death. He was completely emaciated.
I had a question going back, I mean, a fair amount, or I guess from Gettysburg going forward. But the 140 children used on this experiment, have you ever heard anything from any of them? Or
I actually was able, given, as a result of the technical proficiency of the internet and the ability to Google people and find some professional identification of them or whatever, I reached 6 or 7 of the kids, and I have to say, while they didn't remember as much as I did, I was able to confirm that they remembered that we were involved with time travel technologies. For example,
Can I talk to some of those people? Can you bring me some of them? Because I kind of think you're making it up.
all of them remembered the Montauk chair being in our learning lab at our public elementary school, which was Mount View Road School in Morris Plains, New Jersey. It was right down through the woods from my house growing up. And one of them remembered the teleporting up at Curtis Wright, and he started saying...
Karpkosian says he and his wife were also in a bad mindset because their young son died while the war was happening. Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
He was still working in Morristown. He was the one that was still, or one of the 2 of the 7 that were still in town. And he said, Andy, I haven't thought about this for years, but as you're talking, I'm starting to remember. Yeah, they were driving up to that technical place where they had built all those fancy planes. There was still a Glenn Curtiss Air Museum there, what we would walk through to get to Building 68. And he said, yeah, and there was a device there, and we would jump through it, and there'd be like a tunnel. Yeah, man, you're right. I remember that. So, in fact, to my credit, I not only found 6 or 7 of them, but I received a corroboration that we weren't just in a program for gifted and talented school children. The whole group essentially validated my memories in the sense that they remembered the primary time travel device that was physically in the learning laboratory, which was the Montauk chair.
We need to interject something that you haven't brought out, that is the fact that you were mind controlled as well.
Well, we were brainwashed.
Yeah, so
not mind controlled.
You went through electroshock and a few other things to basically write memories.
Well, they involved us in a shocking game where we learned obedience to military authority. That was pretty vindictive and cruel.
Yes.
It wouldn't pass muster under the torture convention today. That was depicted in the book Silent Weapons by the Hersha sisters. I may have been the very session they were in. As you say, when the word got out after midsummer of '71 that I was actually a future whistleblower and they were in possession of my book, and they realized I was remembering everything and citing names, dates, places, technologies, experiences, when we would get back to Curtis Wright, they would take us into the engineering building and give us about 30 seconds of electroconvulsive shock to dump endorphins, which prevents short-term memory from
His
becoming...
dad had him tortured. Yeah, that's why I don't understand within this narrative he's trying to paint his father as a good guy. By his own story, his dad had him tortured.
Intermediate long-term memory and hence long-term...
Yeah, so part of that means that not everybody that was involved with the project may have full memory recovery.
Oh, no, they're going to have it... It was blocked then. And they were all...
It's very convenient that the majority don't remember, and the ones that do, you're just saying it. I just have to trust that they talked to you and agreed with you.
So at the end, when I left the project at the end of the summer of '72 in real time, I was taken to a medical lab in New Jersey, and I had needles inserted from the base of my spine up to the back of my head, and I had a chemical infused into my brain and spinal column, and the only way I can describe it is it produced a headache that was so atrocious, that was so evacuating, especially for a child to endure, an 11-year-old child to endure, or a 10-year-old even at that point. It could have been pre-summer of '72. That if a policeman had walked by and I could have grabbed his pistol, I would have shot myself to death in the head. It was that bad. And as that was going on for several hours, somebody wearing a mask was saying, "This is how you'll feel every time you think about what your experiences in Project Pegasus." And he...
Is that how all it takes is you just saying it? You will, that's what Pavlov did, right? He's like, you will associate this food with the sound of a bell. When I ring this bell, you're gonna drool so hard. You don't shout people into conditioning. That's not how this works.
He had me walk it all the way through the moment my dad took me up to the teleport at Curtis Wright in winter of '68, all the way through what I had just done in summer of '72, like going to the year 2045 from that Stargate device at Cerritos. And that was an attempt to associate this evacuating headache with my project memories. But you know something? In that torture session, I said, I am not going to forget. I don't care how painful this gets. And so really what my story embodies is not of a young child being tortured to obscure or conceal his time travel experiences. What my story embodies, and I hope that readers will get from my book, is that what my story embodies is the triumph of the human spirit over the worst kind of adversity.
That's what you're taking from this? What the fuck?
Because what really happened is...
Really, this is all about the triumph of the human spirit, and by the human spirit, I mean myself. My human spirit.
One person, namely myself, and I don't mean to be self-aggrandizing or being
Oh, he's just literally doing the thing I did as a bit. Okay.
glorious, but it's really the truth of what happened, so I have to tell it. One human being overcame the entire U.S. Department of Defense in trying to keep secret its time travel secrets.
That's certainly a nice story, sir.
I overcame that torture session. I have a continuity of my experiences hidden in safe locations all over the earth. The story is going to be told even if I'm assassinated or I die, God forbid, accidentally. And so that's what happened. The human spirit won, and as I love to say in my talks, Tesla wins. We all know that Nikola Tesla was the greatest applied scientist in the history of our great American civilization.
Jesus.
He was more ethical than Westinghouse and Edison. Edison cheated him when he first came to the United States. He cheated Tesla on a bet, a $50,000 prize that Edison had posted for the solution of a technical problem that Tesla came to the United States to tell Edison he had the solution to that problem. He did. Edison cheated him out of that $50,000 prize. There was the whole subversion of Tesla in the battle between direct and alternating current.
Okay, none of that means he helped invent time travel. He had a lot of bad ideas along with the good ones.
And the underfunding of him, they bankrupted him, but I'm here as a fellow Slavic American to tell you that, of Tesla's, that is, as a Polish American, he of course was a Serbian American immigrant to our country, that this great Slavic American immigrant inventor does become the principal figure in our human civilization because he invented the technology, the civic infrastructure of the 21st century, and through the efforts of my Polish American father and of myself as someone who's half Polish American, I want you to know that there was a major Slavic contribution to the future because Tesla wins. Tesla's technology does not get suppressed. Our children are going to be living in a world where they're going to be able to be in London, England, and instead of spending 24 hours in a commercial airliner, they're going to be jumping halfway across the planet, to the other side of the planet, to Auckland, New Zealand, or Sydney, Australia, in seconds rather than in 24 hours. And that world is only going to come about because Tesla lived, and he had a brilliant imagination, and he had the ethicality to disguise what he was doing. And fortunately, some major heroes in the executive branch of the government empowered my father to go back and recapture his teleportation experiment, and now I'm telling the story of its direct application in the U.S. defense technical community. And as president, I'm going to declassify and deploy Tesla teleportation for real-time transport led by the United States. Imagine the economic and technical renaissance we'll have as the United States when we start declassifying these technologies and we literally occupy the field of high technology once again. Not to blow up the world, but to make it economically and socially integrated.
Look, the idea is great. The idea of instantaneously, removing the distances between people, being able to go anywhere, being able to transport goods and services anywhere they're needed. It's a beautiful, wonderful idea, but it's not something we can do currently. Maybe we never will. But it's certainly not happening because this guy on YouTube got a bunch of recovered memories in his mid-30s of his abusive father. It's just not what's happening, man. So, we've been going over 3 hours. I think that's probably it for today. I think we've heard enough of this man's inane ramblings. Real quick, I'll show you the I don't know if the trailer's any good, but let's take a look at the trailer for the history of time travel, because it's funny. I enjoy the movie. Actually not tomorrow, Tuesday. I have electrolysis tomorrow, but I will be back Tuesday for Tinfoil. And then I believe Wednesday I work all day. Thursday we'll be doing the BitChute and Rumble ads, I believe, so. This is that movie I mentioned earlier, The History of Time Travel. It's like a fake documentary, like a mockumentary about time travel, where the timeline keeps changing mid-documentary.
One of the great
You'll have to time travel back to catch the full stream, and that's what the VOD's for.
struggles, if not the greatest struggle, has been man versus time.
We are prisoners to time. Mankind has always been fascinated with the idea of escaping from it.
To be able to go back in time and fix a mistake, or change the outcome of a future event?
Could it even be possible? Well, what did Einstein think?
Anne told me that Edward worked for the government, but even she didn't know what he did.
I can only imagine what it must have been like to have been there when he actually did it.
Pandora's box has just been opened.
It changed everything. We know what Richard created, and we know that it worked. What we don't know, even to this day, is how he did it.
A machine that can alter history is power that can be very dangerous in the wrong hands.
If you thought the idea of Hitler with an atomic bomb was a bad idea, then Stalin with a time machine was terrifying.
We really can't comprehend what the Soviets did to the fabric of time.
This is a special report from KRNK News. The space race is over.
All that we know is that they beat us at everything.
It's one small step for Russia, one giant leap for communism.
Nah, it's a cute movie, though. Like I said, it's on YouTube. Fuck it, I'll throw you a link to the whole movie on YouTube if you want to watch it. Here it is. Yeah, it's like a cheap independent film, but I enjoyed it. It's only a little over an hour long, so if you got some time to kill, maybe check it out. Alright, let's see who we're gonna raid on Twitch, shall we? We'll raid KF Logan.
Is in the air.
Alright. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. I'll see you Tuesday. And have a great evening. I hope you had a good long weekend if you had one. Alright, night everyone! Adios. I'm gonna go have some leftover pizza, because I'm hungry. Bye everyone.